think I am good.
Okay.
You were a little quiet last time, but I think maybe I was just too loud. But I might turn you up a little bit.
Yeah, one second. I'm gonna disable this preview. Okay.
You're sounding slightly laggy to me. I don't know if it's because you're like doing something or
It should be a little better now.
you sounded good there.
For some reason, when I have the like preview panel enabled in OBS, it causes the system to perform way worse than when I turn it off. So I usually like have it started just to make sure everything is right, and then I disable it for the actual stream.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta mute this so I don't hear my own chat. That's kind of a classic blunder that I've committed before, or that I don't broadcast myself so that when I'm listening to the chat, you know what I mean? Whatever. All right, what do we got here? Twitch is loading.
Yeah, I'm checking.
Okay, let me go on the right thing. Cards, streams, and podcasts. All right, let's go live in 3, 2, 1. What's going on, guys? We're coming to you with another in our series of card reviews. This time, we're going to be looking at the British. So, we're going to be doing a review of the British cards here, and we're going to be focusing primarily on the cards' performance in draft, though we might say a few words about their performance in constructed as well. The reason for that is just that draft is a lot easier to evaluate than constructed. Okay, so, Sploosh, you want to introduce yourself here?
Yeah, hey there. I'm Sploosh. Been playing this game. We did do another video starting with the Germans last week, and that you can find that on YouTube. It's Sploosh IRL is my username, and you can rewatch that. But we both have some experience with card games. We've been pretty successful in this game currently and in draft, and we wanted to share some of our knowledge. And we haven't discussed how we feel about any of these cards, so we're kind of going in fresh for this discussion. So I'm excited to hear what Kingsley or Tower 9 has to say about these cards today.
Yeah, let's get right to it. Okay, so we're gonna be discussing the we are gonna be discussing the British card pool here. So let's go to the card collection. And one other note, we're both like I would say we're pretty good at this game. We're both currently in the top 10, but like we're by no means super hardened veterans. Like I've probably been playing this game for about a month at this point,
Yep,
maybe a little bit less. I do have, quite good results in draft and constructed, but I'm sure there's people who know this game better than we do. So, take all this stuff with a grain of salt.
of course.
Okay, let's get started. 111th Indian Brigade. What do you think about this card, Sploosh? One
Well,
cost, one operation, infantry, fury, 1/3. When your HQ gains defense, it gains one extra defense.
something of note. First of all, they don't even have a zero cost. I just realized that staring at this. I thought everybody got like some kind of
Oh, wait, hang on. I didn't hit show all. There might be one. No, there isn't. They don't have one.
right. I was clicking, think maybe I'm missing something, but
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Also, one quick overview: the British in this game, they have a lot of pinning elements. They have pretty good air, and they have a lot of operations and like counter operations type stuff. So they have kind of some nice tricks available. Some nice tricks available.
Well, and we
Their
should
tanks have
mention
bad offense but good defense.
we should quickly mention we are going to focus on draft today, and the devs actually went down the win rates in draft of each faction. And were the British the worst of the drafts?
Yeah, the British were the worst in draft actually, and that might become evident. The reasons why might become evident as we do some of these card reviews. But I think some of it also is they have kind of a lot of combo type stuff where it's not going to be as good in draft as it is in construction. I think we'll see that as we progress.
I agree, and that's been my experience before the devs went into it. I think we both did discuss like which factions we choose, and we're both like, British was the hardest. So I think we both have the achievement where you've won 7 games with each faction, and right, you did do that one. And so
Oh,
what,
you mean what? Like won the draft, won the
like the
draft completely?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so we both kind of discussed that doing the British was like kind of the hardest one, and it's like because the British seem to be combo oriented, and they're sort of like theme decks. Would you say? Like I feel like the whole faction is like a theme faction, and so it's hard to make a theme deck when you're drafting. Um,
Yeah.
so
Although
yeah,
I don't know, if I recall correctly, I didn't find the American draft that easy, and Americans based on the dev info are very strong in draft.
uh,
Though I've been doing better with them more recently. Though I think I was kind of taking the wrong stuff when I first got started.
yeah. No, I actually find that I win the most with pretty much my findings were exactly what they found. We talked last week about Germany, and I really did love Germany, but I always felt in my gut if I could choose between Germany and America, I would always take America, and or USA, whatever. But so I found it interesting because Dev put that out to read that and see that my gut was correct, you know. But let's go on this guy here. So first of all, I'm actually shocked that this guy is, what do they call it? Is this elite? No,
This
special.
is special.
Special. So I'm shocked this guy's special. I don't feel like he's very special. I
Yeah, I
actually,
think this card is extremely bad.
yeah, I don't. I actually had him in my last deck that went 7-2 in draft, and I was never like super happy to get him. I was like sometimes maybe I'll save my first airborne's life or something, but I would not pick this guy aggressively. I'd give him like a 2. He's acceptable, and I do find the British are terrible early game, so I never pick highly their early game cards because they're quite frankly not that good. I hope that maybe my sub faction will correct their weakness. However, when the draft is starting to get to the end and you kind of notice your curve is terrible, I did grab this guy in my draft deck
Yeah,
because I just don't want to lose in the first 5 turns. So
yeah. He's not absolute garbage. He can hold off some early rushing units, but he's the other thing is there's another unit where it's also a 1 cost 1/3 with Fury, but it's a tank.
mm,
And being a tank is better than this when your HQ gains defense, it gains 1 extra defense, at least in draft. Um, so he is kind of just a worse version of another card, given that you're unlikely to have a lot of HQ defense synergy built into your deck.
I just realized he doesn't even have guard. I kind of assumed he had guard the whole time.
No.
Oh, jeez, it's even worse than I thought. Okay,
Yeah, I would put this card like at a 2. I think it's
sure.
like you take this if you need to fill this cost slot in your deck, and really not otherwise. All right, let's move on. First, Airborne. This is a card that was added in the recent expansion. It's a 1 cost 1/1 with Mobilize, Fury, and Smokescreen, and it looks totally awful because it has 4 operations. But at the start of your turn, it's -1 operation cost if you're mobilized. So basically, the mobilization for this unit is giving you not only stats but also reduced operation cost.
Yeah, I want to give this guy a 4. If you,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm with you on that. I'd say this is a 4.
I want to give him a 5, but he can be countered not very easily, but somewhat easily, and he kind of isn't that good, even if he just takes a damage. And if you heal him, it doesn't matter. The mobilize is gone. I learned that. This is one of those cards, though, that is weirdly a trap card for constructed. I mean, we're not talking about constructed today. However, I will just mention, like when I was kind of the newbie, I love this guy probably too much, and in constructed, this guy's I don't want to say terrible, but very unlikely to actually succeed in his job. However, in draft, he's like a finisher. This is the kind of card where if you get him on turn 1 and they don't do anything to him for like 2 turns, you probably just might win the game straight off from playing this guy. And I've totally did it in my recent draft deck where I had 3 of these guys, and I had some good pin stuff, and I would just set it up so this guy maybe I wouldn't even wait till his or what is it? What's the word? His like energy or whatever. What's that word for the 4? When that gets to like,
Operation cost.
yeah, when his operation cost gets to 1, I might start moving based on how the
Yeah,
game is going. I won't always wait till 0, and then sometimes if I have like really good pin cards, I'll pin them at 1, move him up, and then he'll not get hurt the next turn, and then boom, I hit their base for like 10. You know.
yeah. So like this guy, if he gets the chance to charge up, he's amazing. In draft, he'll often get that chance. In constructed, especially with like the current crazy state of aggro, there's a lot of small removals that will kill him. And another problem is that you might think, oh, once he's mobilized and becomes a 2/2, a one damage effect won't kill him. But the problem is it will remove his mobilize once he takes damage. And if you have a 2/1 with 3 operations cost, that's really not going to be getting huge results for you in all likelihood.
Yeah, but the key here is his fury. I mean, whatever numbers you
Yeah,
have on
Fury
this
is really
guy.
strong.
Yeah, it's
I'd say this guy, like you were saying, probably a 4 in constructed. He's close to a 5, but he is really vulnerable to removal. Or I'm sorry, not in constructed, in draft.
right.
And in constructed, he can be good, but it's just so much more likely that they'll have an answer for him.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the next item here. Scout Shout in chat says mobilize poo poo. Yeah, mobilize in constructed is not the strongest mechanic in the world right now. There's just so much removal and so many damage effects. And additionally, with aggro being so strong right now, you don't necessarily even have time to have one of these units charging up in the backfield. Like if you can get it, it can sometimes be really good, but you have to have a lot of things go right in an environment with lots of aggro and lots of removal. Smokescreen helps, but not enough, in my opinion. All
And
right.
yeah, quickly, out of like my 7 wins in my recent draft, I think this guy legitimately stole 3 games. Like he's that
Nice.
powerful. Where maybe not every, it's not going to happen every game, but you're gonna steal probably at least 1 to 2 games with that
Across the
guy,
course of a draft.
and that's pretty good pick for something that's just going to get you those like free wins.
All right, let's move on. 85th Pioneer Company. This unit is a 1 cost 0/4 with smokescreen. Every faction has one of these where they cannot really fight with 4 operations, and they're a 1 cost 0/4, but they have a good passive ability. This one is your orders cost 1 less credit. What do you think about this?
I want to say 3. It's definitely
Yeah.
not a great pick. Like it's not. It's like acceptable. You better hope to get a bunch of card draw to make this worth it.
The
Because
other cards of this type are unfortunately actually a lot better in draft, in my opinion,
yeah,
because you have this one is a little more. You have to be built around this ability a little more. You have to have a lot of orders, uh, and in constructed it can be something else. But again, in draft, I might even give this guy a 2. Quite frankly, given his rarity, I think you'll often have a better option to take instead of him.
yeah, I wouldn't fight you on that at all. It's hilarious when resistance cards cost 0, but otherwise, like,
Oh yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, like resistance in draft, it's like, oh no,
yeah,
like.
yeah.
All right, let's move on. AA Barrage, 1 cost, target air unit must retreat. Give your HQ +2 defense.
I mean, a 2 or a 1, right?
I'd give this probably a 2. I think this is a very mediocre card. You can compare this to the Soviet card that is 1 cost, deal 4 damage to an air unit. Um,
Oh,
and that one is itself kind of a niche pick, but in my opinion, much stronger than this because the HQ +2 defense is not all that important in draft. Draft tends to be like everyone's sort of doing some kind of value mid range type thing. Not always, but a lot of draft decks just sort of end up being that.
right.
So the +2 defense is not that important. Retreating an air unit is, it's not terrible. One problem is that some good air units have abilities that go off when they come in, especially the good U.S. bombers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you can buy some time, but it just doesn't really seem that worth a card slot, in my opinion. So I would probably give this, yeah, like you were saying, a 1 or a 2. It would be very low in the priority.
It compared to last week's German card that lets you cantrip off the card. I mean, that
Yeah, pan
you
an
know
air unit and draw a card. That's much better than this, in my opinion.
exactly. I'll leave it at that.
All right, let's move on. Aerial reconnaissance, 1 cost. When the enemy deploys a unit, reduce cost of all your orders in your hand by 1. This is a trap card. It's a countermeasure. I think this is also really bad.
I
I would probably give this again a 1 or a 2 in draft at least. You're not going to be likely to have something that's built around this card enough for it to be strong.
I've never played this card in draft or constructed. Don't plan on doing it anytime soon.
Okay. All right. Well, these have been easy thus far.
Yeah,
Okay, close air support, 1 cost. Give a friendly unit +X/+X, where X is the number of British air units you control. This one is a little more interesting. I think for this one, I would ideally like to give it like a 2.5 or something for draft at least, because I don't think it's that reliable that you're going to have a large number of British air units in particular.
Hmm.
You just don't have as much of an ability to build around it as you would in a constructed game, where this can potentially be quite strong.
Yeah, let's just realistically, how many British air units can you expect in a deck? I mean, real right? Seriously, how many? Maybe like 9. Does that sound fair?
Oh,
Um,
one sec. Scout Shout says, important to note you in AA Barrage your own aircraft for the nasty on deploy effects from British planes. That is strong. Thank you for pointing that out, Scout Shout. We're focusing primarily on draft here for this review because in constructed, the evaluations of things change a lot. And, something could be in constructed, it's easy for something to be like a 1 in some decks, but like a 5 in other decks. So in terms of numerical reviews, we're going to focus primarily on draft, but we are going to have like some comments on constructed as well. So like AA Barrage is definitely much better in a constructed deck than it is in a draft deck. And I think actually this plus air support card is a good example of the same thing. Like Splish was saying, you can only really get like 8 or so British air units. Some of them will probably be heavy. It's unlikely you get them all out at once. It's
yeah, and I'll cut like so the card that's coming up next, Cup of Tea. I had 2 in my draft deck recently, and it's British units only. And I found it at best was giving 2 units bonuses, and that's not even air units. It's just British units. So if you consider British air as a limitation, I mean realistically, I don't see you getting more than roughly 8 British air
Well, one
units.
benefit of this card is even though it needs air units, you can play it on any unit. So because of that, you might find yourself in a situation where it's like, oh, I want I want to buff my artillery. It's okay to do that with this as long as you have air units to give it, plus X plus X. All right, let's move on to the cup of tea that you were just discussing. 1 cost, give your British units +2 defense. I think this card is actually pretty strong in constructed in draft, like you were saying, you're not necessarily going to have that many British units. It can still be decent,
Hmm.
but it's not to die for by any means. I would give this probably about a 3. And it depends also on what units exactly you have.
Yeah, I honestly wish I didn't even have it in my deck, but I do find with the British faction that you kind of get stuck between a rock and a hard place with your card selection, and this was just what I ended up choosing. I wasn't completely upset with it. It is very cheap to play, and it can turn the tides, in some fights.
This
So,
also combos well with some other British things. Again, probably less relevant in draft, but naval support, which changes your attack to match your defense. This
yeah.
obviously you do this first, then you play naval support. That can be a big buff. You can get some pretty powerful units. It's also really good in a commandos deck. Again, that's a constructed thing, but we're gonna get to commandos soon. They deploy under a smoke screen, and anytime you do an order, they deal 1 damage to a random target. But because they only have 1 HP, they're very vulnerable to all kinds of small removals. And if you play a commando and then play this, not only does it make the commando harder to kill, it also triggers his ability for little ping. So that's a nice trick for that type of deck. But again, you're very unlikely to be able to make that in draft. That's more of a constructed thing.
Yeah, I give this a 2 and whatever. It's just a
I'd be a little more generous. I'd give it a 3 in draft, but I don't know. Maybe I tend to be a little generous
You
with
you are more
constructed
generous than
decks.
me. I do like to think of threes philosophically as cards I will take and like be pleasant, like pretty happy about. It's obviously
Yeah,
not going to be the ace card in my deck, but it's a card that like, whoa, yeah, yes, I want that in my deck. 2 is like, all right, I'm gonna play it, but like I wish it was something else, of a similar rarity. And
that's
and
fair.
and 1 is like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty upset that this is even in my deck, but I had literally no choice. you know.
All right,
So just
Gladiator.
philosophical.
Gladiator Mark 1, 1 cost fighter, 1/3 vanilla, 1 operations cost.
Man, this is tough because I actually play like 3 of these in my constructed deck, but in draft, man, like it depends on my curve. It's actually okay because it does damage when it gets attacked, you know, and
Yeah, it's not
it
bad.
it's kind of like those 1/3 tanks, except you don't even have to pay the cost to go in the front lines, and it's okay with the close air support. So Like,
I would probably give this, again, a 2. I don't think it's amazing. Like you were saying, it's a lot better. You may be noticing a theme here where even starting out, we've talked about a lot of cards where we're going to give them low ratings for draft, but we're saying they have some good use in constructed. I think that kind of describes a lot of the British faction as a whole, quite frankly.
I think that's pretty much going to be their theme of the night is good and constructed and not so good in draft. It's just the problem with the faction. So
All right,
yeah, we can move on.
let's go to the next one here. Humber Mark II. This is what we were discussing earlier. It's an armored car, counts as a tank. One cost 1/3 with Fury, and one operation cost. So this is, in my opinion, this is like a solid 3 in draft. I think
Sure, I'll give you
it's
that.
it's not incredible, but it can definitely do some damage. And if you couple it with some type of buff, it can actually be extremely strong. But in draft, it's less likely that you're going to be able to set that up than in constructed. Uh, you know, if you can hit it with something though, I've had games where I managed to have this on the front line and it gets naval support and I can attack the enemy base for 6. That's pretty solid.
Yeah. Is there any other
But
buffs that come to mind though? Because I
there's a bunch of them from other factions.
yeah,
There's also, I forget what this unit is called, but one of the British Guard units. When you put it down, it gives +1/+1 to infantry and tanks that are alongside it. So you could use that to give
sure,
this guy +1 and then kind of lunge forward.
sure. Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's go to interception. Counter an enemy order that targets a friendly target.
Two. I mean,
You,
you
you
know,
give this a 2? Man, I would actually, I like this card a lot in draft. I would give this
really.
I would m- maybe even give it a 4, honestly.
You find
Because
yeah. Removal's not
in draft,
that
removal is
common.
hard to come by, and having something that is going to shut down some removal effect can be really impactful, in my opinion.
It's possible my opponents just aren't drafting properly and not taking enough removal. But I mean, most people, and realistically, uh, I mean, a draft deck is probably like 20% removal, right? Even if that, maybe some people probably aren't even drafting that much removal. But then a lot of removal is not even targeted. Like you've got the 2 in the back line. Um, I don't know. I just like don't get me wrong. Like I actually think it's a pretty solid card, and it's close to like really solid and constructed also. Um, I don't know. I leave it at that. Like I think Secret Operations is obviously much better, but that's
Well,
a
yeah,
more higher rarity.
we're gonna get to that one soon.
Yeah.
All right. One important note is this only works on orders. It does not work on other countermeasures, and it does not work on what's it called? It does not work on unit-based removal. So, for instance, if the Germans play that tank that makes your unit retreat, this does not help you against that. But if someone plays an order that made you retreat or whatever, it would work against that.
Sure.
Okay, Monty. One cost. Pin all enemy units. Draw a card.
I I think I want to say 5.
Yeah, this is a 5. This is one of the best cards in the game. It's extremely good in constructed. So, okay, so 1 to pin the entire enemy board is extremely strong, and it replaces itself. Um, it is elite rarity, but it has merited that, in my opinion. It's extraordinarily strong.
I in my last draft deck I had this card, and it was between this and Night Raid, which is a 5 cost that gives you another spell and like a 2/1 guy that the guy you were talking about earlier, the commando. And I chose this, and I wasn't sure if I was making the right choice, but after playing the deck and going 7-2, I knew that I made the right choice because this guy was setting up those airborne guys we previously discussed, and so I was getting these really sweet turns where I would play the airborne guy. The airborne guy would move up, then I would play Monty, and then I knew they pretty much couldn't do anything, and then boom, I would just destroy them. Also, he combos really nicely with artillery because I had like the 2/1 artillery or that 1 damage, he dies pretty easily, but because I could set up the pin, I knew next turn I would get what I needed out of it.
Yeah.
And for
I
1
think this
cost,
is
it's on curve. Like you pay like whatever, like 3 plus 1, and you're getting like 1 off curve of your deployments, and it's extremely powerful. And
yeah, I think this is a extraordinarily strong card.
worst
Okay.
case, yeah, it's a cantrip. So
All right, naval power. 1 cost, pin an enemy unit, give your HQ +3 defense.
This is just a bad Monty.
Well, okay, so yeah, you look at the other one, and it's like wildly. I would say this card is like probably a 2.
Yeah.
It can be useful for its control aspect. It does buy you a little bit of extra time with the HQ defense, but there are other cards with a similar role that are better. And not just Monty, which is an elite, but Desert Rats, which is a card that we'll get to soon, is pin a unit and deal 1 damage. And that is often better than giving +3 defense to the HQ, at least in draft play, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too cynical, but like this is one of those cards where I like literally someone plays it against me, and like my memory is that that's the person that like I beat that game. You know, like I mean, obviously you get these cards because you're stuck with them. I mean, I got some bad cards in my deck that we discuss and that we'll go over, but I don't pick this thing heavily at all. It's just not doing enough for me to be a pick worthy card. So.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, let's go to the next one. Resolute Defense. 1 cost, give a unit with guard +1/+3.
I don't like buff cards too much, so I don't take this too much. I mean, I'll give it kind of a cynical 2, but like it could be a 3, and I wouldn't argue with you too much. Like,
yeah, I think I would. I know I would probably err on your cynical side there and give this one a 2, at least for draft play. It can be strong under the right circumstances, but it's a buff card that only works on very certain things. Now, one benefit of this, of course, is that there are a fair number of characters that are guard units with a very low attack.
yeah.
And this one can be good in that. This one can definitely be good in that aspect.
And for some reason, a bunch of guard units have Fury in this faction, but
yeah, so
yeah,
this certainly can be good, but it's narrow enough that I don't really like it. I would probably give it a 2.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's situational.
Counter an order that targets a friendly unit and give the unit +2 defense. 1 cost countermeasure.
So this is one of those cards where I'd say it's constructive good, and that's a good thing for even draft. Like I would take this pretty highly.
I would say this is a 4 or maybe even a 5 in draft, and also strong and constructed.
Yeah, because not only is it sort of a 1-for-1 trade, but you're probably countering with tempo because you only paid 1, and they probably paid at least 3 for whatever they were doing. So you're getting.
It just messes up their turn. You know, they had their turn planned out, and they were going to play this order, and then like, oh, not only did it not go off, but your guy got extra defense.
So the trade they were planning on now doesn't work, and it's worse for them.
This is great for protecting artillery and air units in particular.
Which is what people use their removal on. And British, they're good at bombers, right? So
yeah.
You're probably protecting a bomber. So yeah, this is an incredible card. Obviously I would choose like a bomb super tank or something over this, but other than that, I would probably take this card.
Hey, what's up, Zyconia? Yeah, this is not Legion. We're doing a cards stream today. All right. Swordfish Mark 1. This is a bomber. 1 cost, 1/3, 1 operation bomber.
At least a 3. In constructed, it's higher, like a 4 for sure.
This card is crazy. So like you can play like the British air deck where you have large numbers of small bombers and like close air support to buff them and all kinds of. It's a crazy deck. I would give this probably a 3 in draft. I think it's decent, but not that great. But in constructed, it becomes much stronger, and even in draft, it's by no means bad. It's like a decent early drop. The weakness is now being a bomber is good because you can hit units with no retaliation, but it's also kind of bad because they can hit you with no retaliation. So if this is like your turn 1 drop, you have to hope they don't have an aggressive unit with good HP. But it can often be that 1 point of damage that just plinks somebody off, so it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's good against infantry, worse against tanks. You probably need to have guard units to play this thing properly, because it's not going to kill anything in like one go. You might have to like get them with attrition.
I don't know. It can pick off some rushing units.
Yeah, I don't like most draft units I pick have like 6 health or something. So
Yeah, but I'll take like the Russian 3/1 one drop. You know, that guy can do some good early damage.
Oh yeah, like listen, I'm giving this thing a 3, a solid 3,
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
and he can feel like a nightmare sometimes. This is the kind of unit your opponent plays on you, and you're kind of grown, and then it's like turn 6, and he still has this stupid thing out, and you're like, oh my gosh, am I ever gonna kill this thing? So I mean, he's a good guy. I'd pick him pretty well, pretty highly.
All right, let's move on. Tactical withdrawal, one cost. All friendly units in the front line retreat and are fully repaired.
Uh, I don't like ever pick this. Maybe it's I'm wrong. It's situational. I don't find when I play British I'm ever doing anything in the front line. So this might be more like a card you pick if you're playing a different faction primarily, and then British is like your sub faction. Do you disagree? Like I don't even know when I'd
I,
want this.
I don't know about this in constructed. You know, maybe there's a strong use for it. I wouldn't be that surprised. In draft, I would give this like a 2. I think it's inferior to almost all other healing cards in draft play.
I agree. Yeah.
If we see future units, like if we see units that like have a cool effect when they move to the front line in the future, that might be something else. I know in the U.S. there's a guy that makes it so that anyone who moves to the front line gets buffed, and there's another guy who naturally buffs himself if he moves to the front line. If we see some more effects like that, or even some like damage a unit when you move to the front line or something like that, this card would become a lot better. But right now, I really find it inferior to other healing options.
The U.S. does have the guy that draws a card when he moves to the front line. That's fun.
Oh yeah, that too. That's a good point.
So yeah,
So
sure.
yeah, you know, I mean, if you have those cards in, you know, and this comes up, it could be a cool option. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it does trade off against like being on the front line and hitting them. So you know, there's that.
Generally in card games, you want to avoid situational cards, and this is a situational card with like your bombers and your mortars or artillery don't really ever want to be in the front line, and those are the kind of units you would care to repair and move backwards. So, like you said, it's kind of a combo card.
Yeah. Yeah, the dream is like there's one of those rare situations where you move a fighter or bomber up to block them, and then like the situation stabilizes, and you move back and play this to repair it and get it back to safety. But that's a super edge case. You know, it's an edge case of an edge case.
It also depends that your back line has enough spaces to fit your front line.
Very
Uh,
good point.
I, you know,
Otherwise, you can set. Well, I don't know. You know, maybe that's the combo that you're setting up, and like you're sending stuff back to your hand so you can play it and get on play effects again. But you know, that's not something you're probably going to be doing in draft.
yeah.
All right, let's move on. The Desert Rats deal 1 damage to an enemy unit and pin it.
I will say I started off really hating this card, and now I don't mind it. Maybe though I don't want 3 in my deck, but I might be okay with like 1 or 2.
I would give this card a 4. I think it's very strong in draft. In the early game, there are many units that have 1 HP that this can just pick off. You know, if the opponent deploys that paratrooper, you can just trade. If the opponent has a Katyusha, if the opponent has various units with high offense but low defense, or if there's been like fighting on a unit is down to its last HP, this can be what you need to finish it off. And unlike other early game removal, or unlike some other early game removal, like Sudden Strike, for instance, this maintains high relevance in the late game because you can use it as a pin effect on a strong unit as well. So I think this is actually a very good card.
Yeah, it could turn the tides if someone has board control with like artillery, and you want to play an artillery and not have it die.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. I might even be not high enough on this card, to be honest.
Okay. So let's check out the Merchant Navy. This is a countermeasure. When a friendly unit is destroyed, your HQ gains +4 defense. I give this a 1. I think this is one of the worst cards in the game.
This is a 1. I never pick it. I honestly don't think I've ever had it in a deck ever.
I consider it markedly inferior to other bonus HQ defense cards, and I consider most bonus HQ defense cards to not be very good, especially in draft. So yeah.
One other thing I would just add is I honestly, and I don't know, I probably played hundreds of games at this point. I don't think I've ever had anyone play this against me either. I think everybody seems to know this is not a good card.
I think I've seen it like maybe once or twice. But this is like debatably a 0. I think this might actually be the worst card in the game.
All right, let's move on.
All right, unexpected resistance. 1 cost, another countermeasure. Pin a unit that moves to the front line. If it has blitz, destroy it instead. This
I
is like a sideboard card on a game that doesn't have a sideboard.
Sure, there you go.
Like, if I knew that I was playing against like, a German blitz deck, this card would actually be pretty sick. But that's not really the game that we're playing.
No. And I also don't play this card basically ever. I don't like anything that's so random and out of your control. I could see if you had a deck with tons of removal, you could kind of set this thing up to work for you to at least do what you want it to do, which would be to at least pin something. But a theme we've discussed today is situational cards, and this card screams situational. It's like situational on top of another situational.
There's also the risk where it's like, oh, what if if there's sometimes a situation where the opponent has like a strong unit and a weak unit, and it's very possible that you'll play this and then they'll move the weak unit up and get pinned, and then the strong unit isn't affected by it. So it's like, oh, derp.
This will be one of those cards you'll lose to, like 1 in a million, and you'll be upset about it. But it's like hard to play around because you just don't see it very often.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that doesn't make it a good card. That just means some random time it actually worked out. It's like a high variance card. There he is.
Luker12321, sorry if I mispronounced that, says that no retreat Soviet 0 credits is worse than merchant. Let's take a quick break to look at what no retreat is.
Sure. I'll search for it. No retreat.
No retreat. 0 cost, destroy a friendly unit. Your HQ gains defense equal to the unit's defense. Okay. I think this card is also bad, but I think this card is better because it combos with some Soviet units that have on destroy effects. So, for instance, there might be a situation where you have the 2-cost 1/2 Chaika plane, where when it dies, it becomes a better 3/2 plane, and you use this on it to cause it to die. However, I think that's also very niche and not very good. In draft I consider this like a 0. In draft I would consider this worse. So
yeah,
maybe it's better in constructed, and honestly maybe not. I don't know that much about whether or not there's good combos with this because I don't really like the combo style of gameplay usually.
This also combos. This also combos with the tanks that you spawn and then die at the end of your turn.
Yeah, good point.
And so that's something.
But it's like it spends a card to get 2 defense on the HQ with that. It's like not good.
Yeah, it'd be better just to use those other cards.
Ones that are 5.
Yeah, I would rate this card better than that other card though, because I actually can think of situations where it's good. I do think that
this is probably worse though.
Well, so the thing that sucks about this one, because I think this card's like in the Russian starter deck, and Russia is my favorite faction, so I remember this card. But what really annoyed me as a newbie was that it's defense and not attack, because a lot of times you want to kill a unit that's already like kind of traded or like been wounded, but then the wounded part,
1 health.
Yeah, so then what's the point? I'm gonna heal for 1. Like that sucks. If they change this to their attack value, this card would actually be much better. But
that's a good point, man. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to the British card review though. Thanks for that contribution, Luker12321, who says fair enough to our review there.
You got the 2-pounder.
2-pounder. 2 cost, 0 operations, 1/2 artillery, has +1 attack against tanks.
Operation cost 0 is the highlight of this card.
I would honestly give this card like a 4 in draft. I think this card
Wow.
is quite good in draft.
I haven't played it a lot, so or just had a chance to see it, but I agree. Like it's almost like a mediocre Katushka or whatever. Doesn't have the blitz, but
doesn't have the blitz. The damage is more consistent, but worse against normal targets, but better against tanks. But 2 HP can help. Certainly, I think a Katyusha is like a 5 in draft.
Yeah.
I consider this like a 4 though.
Sure, having the extra health is not nothing, and the +1 against tanks is also pretty decent.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Operations cost though is the real strength. Often you're trying to like hit on value for your units. Like hit on curve and get like the most value out of your credits as possible, and this guy can just be constantly poking them while you're doing that.
Yeah, I would look at this card as almost like a damage over time, because it doesn't really cost you anything beyond the 2 you paid, which is really good because British are terrible early game. So yeah, I'm okay with this being. What did
And
you?
then maybe you get a buff for it, and it ends up doing a lot more damage.
And there's lots of ways to do that. So what did you give it? A 3 or 4?
I would give this a 4 for draft. I don't think it's probably as good in constructed, but in draft, I really like this actually.
Yeah, I'm more negative than you, so I think 3. But sure, 4 is decent. It's almost like a removal spell, and removals always valued highly. So sure.
All right, 5th Brigade, 2 cost, 1 operations, 1/5 guard.
This guy's great. I actually think he's like a 4. Like
I was gonna give this one a 3. I think 4 is definitely arguable. I think among the British cards, this is quite strong.
Yeah, that's true. Because I'm thinking only through British eyes. Like compared to the whole game, this guy is not that special. I had.
He has a big chunk of defense. It will be difficult for people to go through. He's good anti-aggro. Even in the late game, he maintains some relevance because you can use him to guard. You can use him to, for instance, guard bombers against fighters, guard artillery against fighters, guard your HQ against fighters.
There's actually a really strong U.S. Sub British constructed deck that I play 4 of these guys, maybe 3, but I'm pretty sure it's 4.
If you had some buffs for this guy, he's tight. He also works very well with naval support.
It's not the bus. It's just he costs 2, and that's like a really good place for this game. You mentioned in the last video how like if you don't like do stuff on curve, you can just straight out lose. And constructed is such a fast format, and draft's fast too. It's not as fast. People definitely lean more mid range, but there are like some really fast players out there, fast decks, and
This guy is great to have on your side if those like Japanese bicycle regiments or whatever are coming for you.
he has 5 health. Like let that sink in. There's like 4 drops with 4 health. This guy's got that 1 extra, which like just it works out. Like the tanks sometimes have 4 damage, but they don't have 5. As a 2 drop,
definitely soak up some hits.
yeah, he's just a solid 2 drop, and he'll protect your bombers for a long time. And even if you don't buff him, like he's no like super MVP that's just gonna win you the game, but like he for 2 like he's getting it done. That 5 health is a lot. He's only comparable to the Russian guy that's like a 1/8 for 3.
1/8 for 3.
Yeah, and that's 3. He's not 2. So
That's fair.
yeah, it's one of the stronger guard units in the game.
All right, let's move. Let's move to the Albacore. I think this is probably a 5. This card is very strong.
Yeah, I had this one in my 7/2 deck, and yes, I would take this card every single time. It's basically like a removal spell.
2-cost bomber, 1 operation, 1/2, which is not that good. We looked at a 1/3 bomber for 1, but when you deploy it, it deals 1 damage to an enemy ground unit and pins it.
Ground unit is huge. However, this is basically the same as that. What is it called?
This is
Other card we were talking about.
It's
Yes.
a little bit worse because it's only ground unit. But then for 1 more resource, it comes with a bomber that's going to stick around and maybe do a lot of annoying damage. I think this is a very, very strong card. This is also very strong both in draft and in constructed.
Yeah, it's like this is the kind of card that you will play in multiple constructed decks because it's the special, so it can be played as a sub faction.
And as Scout Chat was mentioning earlier, this is one of those cards, you could use your own retreat ability from that AA barrage on this guy, send him back to your hand, play him again, deal 1 damage to something, and pin it. It's kind of janky, but that might be what you need to stop like someone's big tank from getting to your guys next turn, give you some more time to get answers.
Yeah, or people just play retreat cards on you, especially like the Americans have a lot of retreat cards. Especially they have cards that target planes as well on retreat.
This is one of the reasons that like the ME-262 is so bad, because retreating a bunch of planes lets them trigger powerful deployment effects again, and this is definitely one of those.
Yeah, I think that's enough on this. It's a good card.
All right, very strong, probably a 5.
Yeah.
Finest Hour, 2 cost, given arrow unit +2/+2 and blitz.
So because it says air unit, it's situational. Blitz is a tax because you have to pay for the plane, you have to pay for the upgrade, and then you probably have to pay 2 to use the plane.
Yeah.
I
would say that in draft, I would actually only give this like a 3, just because you're not going to have an all air deck in draft. It's very unlikely that's going to happen.
Yeah, I've seen this played in constructed, like for theme decks and stuff. This is a pretty strong card. It can be a
In the British
finisher.
Air deck, this can be very, very annoying. It's a lot of stats. It's blitz. It can really take someone by surprise. But I would give this. I would not rate this as highly. In a draft format, I would give this a 3, or honestly, maybe even a 2. If you don't already have some solid air units to use this with, taking this card in your draft is definitely a significant risk.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna say this card's bad with fighters, but let's be honest, it's meant for bombers.
You really
So
want it with bombers,
right.
but
So how many bombers are you gonna get in a draft deck? Maybe 5 or something.
if you have like that albacore though, that's an awesome combo. If you have 5 resources,
Yeah.
put down the albacore, pin one thing, or maybe even pick it off, play this, bomb another thing for 3.
Yeah.
But that's not reliable in draft play.
It's situational, but you might make it work. You might have a great game. You might also just be holding this card for 6 turns and never draw a bomber. So,
True.
yeah.
All right, let's move on. For the king, deal 5 damage to an enemy tank.
So because it's removal, I have to value it higher than it's probably earned. And 5's a good number of damage. It probably will kill most tanks in the game. So
yeah, even stronger like mid-range tanks will die with this card.
it hurts my soul to say 4 though. I actually think that's too high. Like I think it's a 3, but it's like a strong 3.
I give this a 3 because of what you were saying earlier. Cards that are situational can really have some difficulties, and this is a card where it's only going to be situationally that good because there are going to be those games where it's like, oh, in this game my opponent is not playing tanks,
I've had it happen.
and or they just play small tanks. It's like, oh, I killed like a 2/2.
How many draft games have you played where someone plays this on you, and it's yourself, and I'm sure they know that it's not even like the best play they could be making. It's like they're playing it because you have like a tank, but like you said, it's like a 1/3 tank, and it's like the least priority card. It's like they just killed your pawn, and you have like a bishop running around. It's like
on the other hand, sometimes you play this and it kills like one of those panthers that has 5 defense but heavy armor, and that's like, that's a solid trade.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying there's like I can think of lots of experiences where I can tell my opponent's probably not happy with what just happened because it's like he's spending time and effort and tempo on killing probably one of my least important units. However, yes, if you play like Panther A or basically almost any German tank, this thing kills it. It goes through armor, so it's huge.
Yeah, even still though, I would give this a 3 probably because of it is removal. It will kill most tanks, but I often find that I most want removal against artillery and air units anyway.
Solid point.
Yeah, so I think this is not quite as good as it might seem.
Yeah,
Naval support,
yeah.
2 cost, change the attack on target unit to be equal to its defense.
Really good. This is actually hilariously good against your opponent sometimes too.
Yeah.
You can make
and play this to make it weaker on offense.
Yeah, or it's just a 3/1 and you're like now it's a 1/1.
Yeah, I would say I'm not gonna go overboard with this. I would say this is probably a 3 or a 4.
And the reason is because it's kind of a combo card. And it's situational, and I feel like, is that not the theme of the British? We just keep repeating ourselves.
Because like you described, you can play it on your opponent's stuff. So it's not just, I'm going to make my 1/5 into a 5/5.
Right.
A little more play to it than that.
It can do some funny things. But yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the number 10 commando. 2 cost, 2/1 infantry, 1 operations, smoke screen. Whenever you give an order, deal 1 damage to a random enemy.
I love this guy for draft. Like you said, he's a little weak to. You kind of talked about him earlier, but he's a little weak in constructed because of the 1 health. But in draft, sure. I don't think I would go like crazy for him though. Like for his rarity, he's pretty good though, right? So maybe
I'd give this guy probably a 3. I think he's not the best in the world, but he has a cool effect that can definitely be strong. It's a little luck based though. Sometimes you'll have this guy and they'll have like the Katyusha or the bomber at 1 health or whatever, and you'll just like hit their base when you play orders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he's you don't like he can be a trap card because you start drafting more spells, thinking like you're gonna do this big thing with him, and then you just don't draw him, and you have the bad spells that you picked because you thought you would have him in play.
Yeah, don't get fancy. Don't base your whole deck around this guy. Now, if you're playing constructed, there is a deck that bases the whole deck around this guy.
Yeah.
But that's not where we are. We're in draft. So for draft, I would say this guy's probably about a 3. You know, he can be good, but don't go overboard with him.
Yeah, yeah, he's a very strong 3, but like he's good. He sometimes there's a lot of variance. Like you'll get a game where he'll win you the game, you'll get other games where he'll do nothing. So
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look at Rage. 2 cost. Cards in enemy hand cost 2 more next turn.
I had someone play this against me, and it was really annoying for one turn. And then the next, I actually was thinking it would do this effect every turn, but it really is just next turn. So a little bit of tempo. The negative of tempo is always that you might lose card advantage in the long run, and draft tends to be more grindy than constructed. So I would not take this card over other cards of similar rarity.
Yeah, I would not, because this card is a special. You'll often have a better option than this. I would say this is probably about a 2 in draft play. There's frequently going to be a situation where this will stall them for like a turn, but at the price of card disadvantage. And draft games don't tend to be all that quick, and it's much less the case that you're like stalling for your combo or you're stalling to try to set up the Commonwealth or whatever.
Yeah.
We'll get to the Commonwealth later.
I'll give that a 2 then.
Yeah, same. All right, let's move on from raid to supply drop. 2 cost order. This is a buff spell. Give a tank or infantry +4 defense and guards. Smokescreen is removed. What do you think?
I don't pick this very highly.
I don't pick this that highly, but I think it's probably about a 3.
Yeah.
+4 defense can be good and guard can be good, so it has 2 abilities that are both strong in the right circumstance.
I'm
It doesn't work on air units or artillery, which is annoying, but you know, I think this is a little more looks because you don't need both the effects to be good for this card value. And +4 is a lot of HP and will often let you take another hit or two and
so
maybe get some favorable trades.
I would look at this as a card I would want to play maybe if British is like my sub faction. I don't find the British tanks or infantry to be ever exciting enough that they're doing anything for me. Like the British tanks for me are always like these walls that mostly like. So if I have the front line with British tanks, I find that I'm happy. And if the opponent has the front line with against my British tanks, I'm very unhappy because the British tanks, quite frankly, suck at offense. Like they're generally have like 2 or 3 power, and they take forever just to kill something with 5 health. And so this is just like not helping that situation. It's just making them more tanky. I'm gonna also confess I literally don't, and I've played a decent amount. I think I've played British at least like 10 times in draft, and I don't think I've ever played this card. And I've had a few people use it against me, but I don't know. I could see situations where if I was playing other factions, I would want this effect, but not.
Give this a 2 then.
I think I'd give it a 2 if the British were my primary faction in a draft deck. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a little more generous. I'd give it a 3, but it's not. I don't think it's stunning us. All right, Welsh Guards. 2 cost 1/3 guard. Deployment. Give any target +1 defense.
I like them. I'll give them a 3.
I'd give these guys a 2 actually. I think that I think this is basically the 1/5 guard unit, but usually worse. The +1 defense to any target you can put this on your HQ, which is nice. But a lot of the time, I would just rather have the more stats on the guard unit rather than the +1 to something else.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's better cars, obviously, but I don't know. The extra health sometimes matters.
Yeah.
In draft, I just want something to do on turn 2, and his effect is not. Yeah, and his effect is not completely dead, and you need like a roadblock to protect other units, and usually you're putting the +1 on the other unit that's actually doing something more effective.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not thrilled by him.
I would take the 1/5 over this guy every single time. You know?
That's fair. So I think we said the 1/5 was a 4 and this guy was a 3. And I was saying the 1/5 was a 3 and this guy was a 2.
Yeah.
So I think our ratings are at least consistent there.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's move on to the first Air Landing Brigade. 3 cost, 1 operation, 3/5 smokescreen. Units attacked by this unit must retreat if they survive.
I mean, he's super,
I
higher
think this is bad for an
elite.
elite. But 3 for a 3/5 is like, there's some good value. Even if this ability never does anything, there's just some good value here with the stats for draft. I would say this is like, I don't know, probably a 4, but with the major caveat that there are better things in its rarity, so this might not actually be the best option to pick. Like, if it's between this and Monty, I am picking Monty, like, basically every time, unless I'm in absolute desperate need of units or whatever.
I think that the British have some of the best elites in the game too. So often this is one of the worst elites. All their planes are so good, the elite planes. But yeah, sure. It's so hard to give elites a bad rating because most elites are a little. I don't want to say power creeped. They're just generally better than the other units.
Yeah, they're
So
good. They're good for their cost.
yeah. So yeah, this guy's like a 4, but like there's 5s that are similar rarity. So
Yeah.
you
All
know.
right, let's move on to the 26th Engineer Regiment. 3 cost, 1 operation, 2/2 deployment. Give all other friendly units +2 defense. One important note: this looks like a unit that is mounted in a vehicle. It is an infantry, not a tank. You
You
can
s-
easily be deceived by the art and by the fact that it makes engine noises when you play it.
you you stole my thunder, man. Like, and I bet you we both are thinking about that because we both been burned by it.
Dude, I've definitely been like, oh, I'm gonna move up and attack.
you
Oh
know,
shoot, that's not a vehicle.
I I think I've done it against you. I have this memory because we run into each other in drafts sometimes, and man, this guy looks like a tank. So I'd give this guy like a 3 because especially when you have like a decent board with like a couple things like artillery and bombers and stuff, like this guy's just getting you some value. But oh my gosh, I wish he was a tank. Like that
I,
two damage on a tank would make this guy so good because sometimes you
Yeah,
just want to get
I'd
up
give him a
there.
3, but I'd request that they change his art. Dude, if you're listening, dude, this guy, he can bamboozle you, or at least change the sound he makes when you play him. I don't know.
Right? Oh man, it's so funny.
Something's wrong.
I'm so glad because I know that you got burned by the fact that you said that, and I have too. It's
Yeah.
funny.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
6-pounder, 3 cost, 1 operation, 2/1 artillery, double damage against tanks.
So this was in my recent deck, and I won a lot of games with it. I was not happy to like have him, but not in the I'm gonna give him a 1. I'm just saying like he 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 kind of overperformed for me because I was able to give him a little bit more attack with some other cards. The 1 health is scary, but in draft you can get by with 1 health. So a 3 because artillery's good,
Yeah, I give
maybe.
this guy a 3 with the caveat that in constructed he is probably going to do worse for you because there's a lot of just ping removal that's going to just take you off the board.
Yeah. Double damage
All right,
against tanks also is pretty great. I mean,
true.
yeah.
All right, let's move on to the. Oops, I moved a little too far.
How do you
Argyle. I don't know how to pronounce that. Argyllshire
Shire,
Highlanders.
Shire, Argyllshire.
Argyllshire.
Yeah, Highlanders.
All right, 3 cost, 1/6, 1 operation, +3 attack while guarded.
So situational card. Uh, this is one of the.
That's bad.
This is yeah, because you don't even know how many guard units you're gonna get, man. And I'm sure you have your own experiences, but I've beat people with this guy a lot because you're like, the guard unit's only like 1/3. I can kill that, or 1/4 or whatever. Maybe this guy's better if Russia is your primary faction because Russia's got a lot of crazy guard units that are cheap and easy to get in draft. But if the British are your primary function, primary group, and your sub faction has like barely any guards, which there's lots of them like that. For example, the Japanese have like no guards. The Germans have like no
The
guards.
Germans have actually none. They have 1 that's conditional on the front line only. The Americans have actually none. The Japanese have, I think, 2.
Right. So British guard
Plus 1
units,
that's guard on backline.
the British guard units are actually not that good in my opinion. Like the German ones or Russian ones are way like I don't want to say way better, but they're better.
Look, I think this card is not good. I would give this card like a 2.
Okay, I will cut to the chase. I think though when I was new, I love this guy because I was new and I didn't know any better. Uh,
Here's the thing: the U.S. has a card that's 3 for a 4/4 unconditionally. This card is 3 for a 4/6 conditionally. I
Yeah.
would rather just have the 4/4.
So I got another example for you. So another thing I find with this guy when I play against him, because usually my opponents are playing him and not me, is
Yeah.
he's an infantry unit, and usually guard units are infantry units. So what ends up happening is he's super scary in their backline, but I can control when I move forward. So I only move forward when I know I can nullify his effect. And it's like a it's I don't want to say trap card, but it just looks so much better on paper than in reality.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'll also add that I play against this card more than I think I should. So I
Yes.
suspect people are overrating him.
Thank you. Exactly.
All right, let's move to the next. Let's move to the next card. I would give that guy a 2, by the way.
Sure.
All right, Atlantic Convoy, 3 cost. Add a random U.S. unit with cost 3 or less to the support line, and another to hand.
4.
I think 4 is possible. I would give this a 3 because it isn't consistent, but it is. So, like, this card is card advantage because not only do you get a unit, but you get another one in your hand, so you get 2 for the price of 1.
Also fun when you're at 6 power or whatever, 6 energy, because
But
you.
sometimes you play this, and the unit you get is just dirt. And it's like, oh, tight, I paid 3, and I got, like, I don't know, the freaking, like, 2/2 that costs 1 with no ability.
The dream is the 5/5 guy. I mean, obviously, right?
Yeah, or like you play this and you get like
Ooh,
that bomber that's a 2/2 that makes the unit cost more operation when it deploys, except its ability doesn't go off.
right. That bomber's bad, but you also get the 3/4 guy with blitz, and that's pretty sweet if you have 4.
Yeah, no doubt this card can be thick, but I'm gonna give it a 3 because I don't think it's reliable, and I prefer having effects where I know it's gonna work.
So I'm gonna counterpoint you here. I'm willing to argue over this card. So first of all, the British suck for like the first like 5 turns, and this card is like filler, but it's literally you're like happy to do something. So like I never feel bad about picking this card. I pick it pretty highly because I literally need to be doing something just to keep my opponent busy. And even if I play some stupid 2/2 American truck, I don't care. I have something out, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm getting card advantage, as you said, and hopefully the other card is better than this, whatever first card came out. I've had the nuts with this card. And I have a lot of memories of this card because I pick it a lot. And I often am very pleased. Even if you get crap, it doesn't matter. You're still doing something. And also it's a spell, which combos sometimes with your commandos and stuff. Like, it's
Okay.
it's like a combo card that can just be fine on its own, and it's the perfect example of like a little bit of variance, but like you're cool with it, and like you said, you're getting free card advantage guaranteed. You might just get the nuts, which has happened, where you do get the blitz guy and you get a 5/5. I mean, so there's a lot going on there, and even if you get the worst case scenario, it's still you're doing something. I mean, look at some of these units we've already looked at that are not that great. Like, this is pretty good. Okay, something to do on turn 3. That's
Yeah, I don't know. I maybe I'm just anti-randomness, but I'm still
variance.
I'm not saying
Yeah,
he's bad. I'd give him a 3, but I'm not saying I'm thrilled to pick him.
I'd pick him over almost all these other 3s. And
Okay,
so
that's fair.
keep in mind that draft is often mid-range battles, and card advantage is card advantage, even if it's not great card advantage. Yeah.
No, that's true. Not, maybe you're right. At least for draft, I don't know. We'll see.
For constructed, no, I would not play this card. But
All right. Baluch Regiment, 3 cost, 3/4 deployment. Give your HQ +2 defense.
a 3 and not even loving it. There's better cards. Well, no, I guess like the super sweet infantry guy is like what, a 4-drop, so he comes a little ahead. This guy is like a meat and potatoes card. Like, this is a card you pick over other cards.
This is a 3, maybe even a 4. I'm not entirely sure.
He doesn't trade. He's good for cleaning up the stuff that was played at 1s and 2s, but he's not even like the best thing going on at 3. The fact he's infantry means he doesn't pressure mortars and stuff. So his 4 health is deceiving because it looks higher than it really is. And this is the kind of card that when I'm playing like bombers and artillery, I often kill before they can actually threaten. And it's not free to move up. You got to pay 1 to move up once. Then the next turn, you got to move up again. and hope to be alive by the time that happens.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think this is probably a 3.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the Blenheim Mark IV. This is a bomber, 3 cost, 2/3 vanilla, 2 operations.
I never picked this guy. I don't know.
I'd say this is a 3.
Yeah, sure. I don't ever pick him. He's not bad, but usually around
Not
3.
awful, not great.
Yeah, there's usually better things to be doing, and like the cheaper bombers are getting more work done. Oh, and he has 2 operation costs, which because I like never picked this guy, I didn't even notice. But I'm sure that's one of the reasons I'm not picking him. Two.
Yeah, I'd say this isn't a card you're thrilled about, but like I don't know, it's a decent card to have in your back pocket.
Sometimes you just need some bombers for the value, but yeah.
Yeah. All right, Blockade, 3 cost, 1 damage to any target, double the cost of a random card in the enemy hand.
Don't like it. Don't pick it.
I would say this is a 3, because removal is almost always good. But I want to add that I do consider double the cost of a random card in the enemy hand to be a very mixed value. Like sometimes it's actually amazing, but sometimes it's just whatever.
It's a
I think
10
I would
drop.
prefer the consistency of the pin from Desert Rats to the random. Oh, maybe I just made it so that your like super unit costs 16. You know.
Yeah, you make a 10 cost 20. That's hilarious. I've never seen it
It is
happen, but
possible for this card to make it so the enemy can never play certain cards
yeah.
because your resources cap at 12 unless you're playing things that give you more credit slots.
Yeah, but you compare this to Desert Rats that cost 1, like if for a random effect that might not do anything, yeah, this card is not great. I give it a 3 solely because it's removal, but it's not even great removal. So, I mean, dude, honestly, I'd want to give it a 2, but if you want to give it a 3, I won't argue.
I'd give it a 3. You know, sometimes that ability will also really mess up a turn, but you know.
Sure.
Let's progress to the Coldstream Guards. 3 cost, 1/4 guard. Deployment add a naval support to your hand. I would consider this to be a 4.
A 4. Yeah.
So like naval support we were discussing earlier, that's like a 3 card on its own. 3 cost, 1/4 guard is, that's like below the curve. It's not what you would want for a 3 cost unit by itself, but it also gives you that other card. You could just use it on yourself immediately and become a 4/4 guard, or you could hold it and use it on other stuff. I think this is actually quite strong.
This guy's very good with the 1/3 bomber because you play the bomber and you play this guy, and then you put this ability on the bomber, and now you have a 3/3 bomber for 1 cost to use.
Yeah, also good with the 1/3 armored car that has Fury. Also good with 1/3 artillery from other factions like the Japan AA gun or that American one that removes guard.
There's also a 2/4 vehicle in Brit, right? With Fury, I think.
Yeah, but it has 2 operations costs, so I don't find it that good.
Yuck.
But yeah, there is that one too.
Sure, it's a very good card.
There's a lot of targets for this ability in Britain also. They have a lot of high defense units, so I think this is a strong pick.
Yeah.
All right, Convoy HX-175. Draw 2 cards.
4.
Yeah, I say 4. I would almost even be tempted to give this a 5, but it's not quite. British does tend to have weaker early game, especially in draft. So there is the risk of your hand clogging, but overall, this is just pure card advantage, and it's not that expensive.
This is the kind of card that I think we both think the same. We both want to say 5. This card is a 5 if you're like late in building your deck and you are happy with what you did early, and you have like some big good cards already in the deck, so that like you just need to get to the good cards. I have had situations where I don't pick this card because I'm missing something else. Like, oh, I have to...
And then the removal that I need. And I'm like, oh...
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm just going to take the removal because that's going to let me survive to late game. Or I might take, like, the super awesome, like, beefy unit that I haven't got yet. And we haven't got him to... There's one British unit that's just like, oh my god, the guy's so good. And he's common too, I think. So, like, I would take the meaty awesome guy over this card because I need the meaty awesome guy. I haven't got him yet, So
yeah, we're gonna get to that guy soon. I think that's the Lancashire Fusiliers.
Yeah, so this thing's not like auto grab. There's definitely situations where you have to not pick it, but sometimes this card is the reason to play British. So I'll say that as well.
All right. Move on. Crusader Mark II. 3 cost, 1 operation tank, 2/3 when you give a British order, draw a card.
Whatever.
Three
I
in draft, much stronger and constructed when you can have a deck with tons of British orders, but three in draft, I would say. You
yeah,
aren't going to necessarily have that many orders that you want.
I've had people play this against me, and like basically you just kill it and
Yeah.
move on. And I've maybe seen someone draw one card off of it, like, you know,
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you
situational.
play this in one of the, like, the Commando deck often plays this, like, imagine, like, you play this and then you pin the enemy, and then it's like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, yeah. No, in theory, it's a great card. In draft, it's just an okay card. Like a 3 is
Yeah.
perfectly acceptable.
All right, let's move on to the, oops, I hit 2 pages instead of 1. Fortification, 3 cost, give your HQ +7 defense.
I'm gonna be nice and say 2.
Yeah, I would give this card a 2 in draft. Uh, I do see people playing this in constructed. It can be good as an anti-aggro. It can be good to set up for a different card called the Commonwealth, which I think will be the actual last card we review. But in general, giving your HQ extra defense is not all that good because it does not advance your board and it puts you at a card disadvantage. And there aren't really the situations where you need to like panic hit this against aggro in draft as often. It's more likely that you want to be playing something that builds your own board instead, at least in my opinion.
This is like also a very niche sideboard card in a game without sideboards, because I have
Yeah.
played constructed decks that if I had this card, I couldn't lose because the deck is based on some combo that hits me for like 20. You know.
Yeah.
But
Most notably, the Commonwealth deck is countered by another Commonwealth deck.
yeah, so
Well,
that's
sorry, eventually someone runs out of
well,
cards.
the baby combo is the one I was thinking about, but there's also the whatever. It doesn't matter. So like in draft, I don't want this card. I never take it.
Okay, let's move on. HMS Illustrious, 3 cost, add 2 Swordfish Bombers with Blitz to the support line.
I got a 5.
I would say this is a 4. I think it's not quite a 5.
Nah.
It is very strong.
It's only
So
it's not good if you have like 3 things in your back line, you know?
the issue is also the operations costs of the bombers mean that you don't get to attack with them until later, and when it is later, the 1 damage from the bombers might not necessarily be that good. I think it's better in constructed where you can combo it with other stuff, but in draft, I consider it certainly quite strong. I would still give it a 4, but not like a totally dominant card.
I could see the 4, and I am keeping the lens of value to just the British cards a little bit. I mean, I'm certainly there's lots more elites I'd rather have, but and it is a card I play in constructed, and I love this thing, but man, I don't know, like those bombers are blitzing and you kind of hold it until you need it. It often changes the numbers in a big fight. Your opponent thinks they got you because that you can't do that extra 2 damage, and then, whoa, where did these guys just come from, Uh,
I'm
yeah.
not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I don't think it's like at the absolute top of the game.
Yeah, we can nitpick on it. A 4 it's a strong 4. How about
Okay, yeah,
that?
yeah.
It's a
All
good
right, let's go to
card.
the Hurricane Mark 1, 3/2 Blitz Fighter, 3 cost, 2 operations.
This could be a 4, but it's probably a solid 3. It's actually like
Yeah,
sneaky removal.
I was thinking the exact same thing as you, actually. I was like, is this a 4? I think I gave it a 3, but it's certainly a strong 3.
It could be like a 2 for 1, because like you might blitz out kill a bomber, and then now they have to deal with your 3/2.
Yeah.
It's like
This is really, really good also against those like 1/3 American artillery things.
yeah.
If the opponent has like a one attack thing that this can pick off, it's like really, really good value. But also sometimes you just like play it and immediately swing into something and trade, and you paid 5 to do that, which is kind of a lot for 3 damage.
5 damage is an overcosted removal spell, but it's also potentially a 2 for 1, and
Right.
it does
Or it's
change.
damage to the face.
It also can change math. Like sometimes you just put this guy out and hit something that their opponent didn't predict you could do, and all of a sudden the stuff they're protecting is just super vulnerable because the guard unit they were using is dead. Like it's definitely a good card.
Yeah.
It's
I'd say it's a 3, but it's a strong 3.
sure. Yeah, I agree because it's like light. It's soft removal.
All right, MI5, 3 cost order. Your enemy puts a random card in hand on top of their deck. You draw a card.
4. It's hard not to like a cantrip, and like you're not doing a lot.
Give it a 4, but I actually think this might be more of a 3. and I'll tell you why. In draft, because things are so often value type stuff, this effect is sometimes not really that good. I had a deck with 2 of these that I was playing earlier, and it was just like there were situations like it's always good to play this, but it doesn't like do that much to the immediate situation. You know what I mean?
If your game is mid-range versus mid-range, is a better card than if it's, if it's like aggro,
I think it can be. I think that one of the best situations for this is when it's like locking somebody out when they're like out of stuff. They have like 1 or 2 things, and this is like, oh, you just keep those options for next turn. It basically invalidates their draw. But like
Right.
in draft, I noticed sometimes people just have like bigger hand sizes that make it like less appealing.
Sure, it's a grindy card. I mean, you're basically making your opponent discard a card. Like they're getting the same card back.
I don't know. Maybe this is a 4. It is card advantage.
It is card advantage. They're discarding a card and you're not discarding anything. So that's card advantage, and it's cheap to play. You don't have to play it on turn 3. You can hold it to like 6 or something and sneak it in, on like a dead turn.
That's true.
It gets you, and all cantrips, even if it's a cantrip, like all cantrips are good in draft because you're going to get to your better cards, and you might get a card that you really need. Like, let's say you have 3 removal spells in your deck. This is the chance to get that removal spell sooner than later.
The thing I will say though is the rarity does mean there's sometimes going to be better stuff.
Fair, very fair.
Special.
But I gotta give it a 4. Like, you're getting card advantage, you're not losing anything. It almost feels free to play. The only time it's bad.
I think I'll give this a 4, but I'd say a low 4.
The only time it's bad is against aggro or you're just dying. Someone's tempoing you out. It's not gonna be good if you're getting tempoed out.
That's true. All right, let's move on to National Fire Service. 3-cost countermeasure. When your HQ receives damage this turn, reduce the damage to 1.
I give it a 1.
Yeah, I'd give this a 1. It's not the type of effect that you want in your deck.
I have seen people play it in constructed, and I almost lost to it once, but I still won. So it was a Commonwealth deck.
This can be the thing that buys you another turn.
It's a Commonwealth deck card.
Or it can be a thing that doesn't do anything, or that barely stalls them. So I think not strong, especially not strong in draft.
Yeah.
All right, P40 Kitty Hawk, 3-cost 2/3 fighter, 2 operations, deployment, deal 2 damage to an enemy ground target.
I gotta say 5 because it's removal.
Yeah, I think this is a 5. So this is removal that comes with a unit that's like only slightly below curve.
I want to almost give it a 4 because it's actually not that good of a plane. But for 3, like, okay, I'll take it. The removal part of it is huge.
Not that great, but if you consider it like, oh, I killed their thing and now I have this plane for free.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yep.
All right. QF 40mm MK Mark III. 3-cost artillery, 1/2, 1 operation, +2 attack against air.
I've never played this card.
I would give this card a 2. I think that it's interesting to compare this to the anti-tank gun. That's a 2-cost, 0 operations, 1/2 with +1 against tank.
Or wasn't it a 2-1 that we went over with double to tank for 2?
There's 2 different ones. One of them is the 1/2. One of them is the 2/1. The 2/1 costs 3 and has 1 operation, and the 1/2 costs 2 and has 0 operation.
Yeah, the 2-pounder we went over, we liked, and
The 6-pounder was a little worse. This one I think is the worst of the 3.
Yeah, so this is exactly. There's nothing else to say. This is just not as good as its own faction.
3 for a 1/2 is just not very hype.
Nope.
And even though you often do worry about enemy air units, this has a serious risk of just being overrun by ground units.
Yeah, you want to play this against like bombers, but then if they have bombers, then they're probably going to kill this thing anyway. So.
Yeah, AA guns do not retaliate against bombers, which is odd, but yeah, you gotta watch out.
Yeah, like it's weird that these things can have ambush, but then a bomber still kills them. But whatever.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Radar alert, 3 cost. When the enemy deploys a unit, add a random British air unit of similar cost.
I want to say 4, but I think it's a 3 because of variance. It's actually double variance. Yeah, go ahead.
This one I think I would give a 4.
Really?
But I understand the caveats. The thing with this is that it often can trade up.
It's like more than just 2 forms of variance. First of all, you can't control what your opponent does. They might not even play anything.
Yeah.
Second, you might get something stupid. And third, if you do get a bomber, which is pretty likely in this faction, It might just die because it's a bomber and they just played something. So,
No, maybe you're right. Maybe this is like the U.S. one, but I found this one. I like this one more. I think I found some good results with this. The fact that it's a countermeasure that messes up their plans is also nice. I think I'm gonna stick with my 4, but with caveats. I got you.
it's a 4 when the variance works out and the situation is the way you want it, and if things are kind of mid-rangey and break even, but
Yeah.
it can easily be a 3 or worse if your opponent's aggroing you out. It's not like it's not going to save you.
If you play this and they play a 1 cost, you're just like, well, derp.
And you're playing draft where they're going to have bad cards in their hand. This isn't constructed where everyone's just dropping like the best cards in the game. This
But if
is
it's the late game and you're like, okay, we have like real units that are fighting each other, and now my opponent played like some good tank, and I just got like the 6/6 Spitfire. That's like, man.
you can manipulate this card a little bit by like maybe retreating like a tiger tank and then playing this, you know. I mean there are
That'd be nasty. Is there an 8 cost air? That's nasty though.
I have no idea how this thing works with the higher cost, but it will say similar. I assume similar means like I'll give you a 7 if they play an 8.
Yeah,
You know?
I don't know exactly the mechanic behind this. If someone in chat knows, that'd be cool to hear. But all right, let's move on to the Ultra 3 cost, counter an enemy unit and draw a card.
I actually don't own this card, and I have enough to buy it, and I've considered it. I don't.
I would say this is probably like a 4 or a 5.
Yeah, I mean, I know you were really high on the counter thing, and this actually counters like literally anything. The reason I actually considered buying this card for constructed was because I played the like the 8 cost do 3 damage to everything, and the dude ultra'd me, and I felt really miserable.
Yeah.
Uh,
One disadvantage to this is that it does cost 3, so a lot of smaller operations will trade like evenly or advantageously with this, but you get a card, so it's like, oh.
yeah, this is like secretly like 3 costs, but play it on a higher turn. I think you're trying to get like the value.
Yeah, you want to play this on a turn where you think they're going to use an operation, because 3 is actually a pretty real cost. I wouldn't just like immediately slam pick this on my turn where I have 3 resources for the first time.
It's actually a very good card in constructed, and probably worse, but still good in draft, because in constructed there's a lot of extremely powerful spells that are predictable.
I'd say this is probably a 5 in constructed, but maybe a 4 in draft.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
A 5 in draft too, though. I really like this card.
I actually never got it in draft. I mean, it's rare, you know. It's
That's fair.
elite, but yeah,
It is an elite.
it's a very high quality card. We can nitpick a 4 or 5. It's good.
If you one other note is that in general, if you have a lot of counters, it can be bad to draft more counters.
Good point. They don't do that because some people might only
There's
play
like
so many cards.
diminishing marginal returns on those.
Yeah, you might just play against the guy, and I've been that guy where literally he drops like 7 German tanks in a row, and you're not going to love having Ultra in your hand when that guy does that to you. So,
All right, Valentine Mark III, 3 cost tank, 2/4 Fury, 2 operations cost.
I think you spoiled our hype when you said it has 2 operation cost.
Yeah.
I do not pick this guy highly at all.
I think this is probably a 2. If it had 3 operations cost, I would be so much more excited about it.
Yeah, I think he's a 2.
Little fun fact, this is actually the same piece of art as the Lancashire Fusiliers, I believe, with a different part of the image focused on.
Oh, I'll have to look into that. It's not a great card because the damage is too low for the activation cost. I mean, my God, like to get this guy even up to like a bomber, what's that, 6 or something to use the Fury? I mean, that's like your whole turn, you know?
If you can buff it, it can be tight, but the 2 operation cost on a unit with Fury is pretty bad.
Yeah, 2 works for me.
For a 17 pounder. It's labeled as a 45 millimeter anti-tank gun, but the description says it's a 76.2 millimeter anti-tank gun, so that's like something's wrong there. But let's ignore that for now. 4 cost, 1 operation artillery, 2/3 deployment, pin an enemy tank.
It's whatever. I'll give it a 3. I don't play this
I'd
thing
give it a
very
3.
much. Yeah.
Very strong when there is an enemy tank to pin. You know, you get your artillery piece and you also get a useful effect on deployment. But when there isn't an enemy tank to pin, this is inefficient for its cost.
Can I, like, I don't know, is this like a thing with the British that like they get artillery but it's not good artillery? Like if you compare the cost of this artillery to other artilleries and other factions, like
It has a good effect.
Yeah, it does, and that's why the card's getting a decent rating. But I'm just noticing, like, man,
Yeah.
they all just seem a little low on the damage compared to the
They're
other
a little
factions.
situational. They're like, this is an efficient card, but only against air. This is an efficient card, but only against tanks. It's like the right weapon for the right circumstances, but you don't know whether or not your opponent will have that.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the 22nd Guards Brigade. 4 cost, 2/4 guard deployment. Give adjacent tank and infantry units +1/+1.
I want to say 4 because you can do some dirty things in draft with this guy. It's only tank and infantry though.
Yeah, I'd give it a little lower. I'd say a 3. If it worked on artillery, if it worked on everything, I would definitely give it a 4. But it can't help your artillery or air units, which are often the units that would be the best to buff. So, like, I
Yeah.
don't think it's bad, but I'm not thrilled.
Yeah, in tanks and infantry, I mentioned earlier, like they're like the worst part of the faction. So you're like buffing like a 1/4 into a 2/5 or something.
That's not bad.
I'm just saying, like when I play the
timing is also a little awkward because tank and infantry often want to move to the front. So then you deploy this guy in the back, and your other guys have already moved up. So you're like, oh,
yeah. Yeah, it kind of insinuates that you're playing defense, which the British usually are early game. They're like definitely a slow faction.
I don't think it's terrible, but it's not the best.
Yeah, I take it back. This guy's a 3. I forgot that it's not air units too. I think this is. I've definitely I've done this where I have like a bomber and I play this guy super excited for the bomber getting +1/+1 and then realize I don't get +1/+1. So,
All right. Let's move 25 pounder. 4 cost, 2/4 artillery, 1 operation. Vanilla.
Worse than the pin guy, Like I don't think the 4 health is making up for the fact he does nothing.
Is also a 3, but it's definitely a weaker 3.
Yeah, sure. I don't have much to say.
This is a sick unit with naval support though to make it a 4/4.
Oh yeah.
But that you spent 2 cards to do that. You could have had the 4 cost 3/3 smokescreen artillery from Japan, which I think is better.
Yeah, I'm not. Whatever. Give him a 3. He's not exciting at all.
All right, Black Watch, 4 cost, 1 operation, guard and fury, 1 for deployment. Orders in hand costs 2 more.
Better in constructed than draft. I give him a 3.
Much better in constructed than draft. This card is actually like a key anti-combo card, where you can just blow up a combo deck by making their combo too expensive. But
it's also kind of a combo card because the resistance decks play this to like make your hand more expensive.
It benefits a lot also from buffs to use its fury. But yeah, I think in draft this is probably a 3 or so.
Yeah.
And in constructed, it's much stronger in the right context.
Yep.
All right. Moving on. Blackburn Skua. I don't know how to pronounce that. Skua, let's say. Blackburn Skua Mark II. 4 cost, 2/2 deployment. Deal 1 damage to an enemy. If the enemy is a unit, pin it. 2 operation.
Maybe a 4. Like, cause
I'd say a solid 4.
I mean, he's basically doing the rat thing.
That one that's a 2 cost that has this effect, but only for ground units, and it's a 1/2. Is like a 5. This one, because it costs 4, it's a little more awkward, but it does have the ability to pin air, and it does have that extra point of attack later.
Yeah, pinning air is huge in comparison to the other guy. This is a card that I was super high on and constructed, and then like slowly started kicking out of the deck because he just was kind of expensive. Paying the 2 for 2 damage is not amazing at all. It's pretty low, and this guy gets worse once you start seeing units with armor. And at the 4 cost, like you're starting to get into a place where like there's a lot of good things going on, and 2 damage is not great. But
yeah, 2 damage is not nothing, but it's not.
Yeah. The fact that he does the 1 damage in pin is really the selling point of this card. Bomber is good in draft. Like it's I there's a part of me that wants to say 3 to be honest with you, but 4 is fine. It's a soft 4 at best, but
I think I'd say 4, but I'm not as thrilled. Weak 4. All right, Cromwell Mark IV. 4 cost, 3/6 heavy armor 1. Give this unit +1 attack when a pinned enemy is destroyed. 2 operations. This is like a 3 or something. This is janky.
I think he's definitely a 3, and for his being a special, he's not earning his specialness.
Yeah, I'd say he's a 3 and bad for his rarity. I usually do not pick this in draft because there's often better options available at this rarity.
There's other tanks even in the faction that are similar, but just are better. So, yeah, I think we can leave it at that. There's not a lot to say. There's just other stuff that's better.
All right, we'll move on. Daylight bombing, 4 cost, 2 damage to enemy target. The enemy loses a credit slot.
I goofed around with this card in a draft deck because the losing a slot actually is really annoying in mid-range versus mid-range.
Yeah. I give this guy a 4.
Yeah, it's removal, and believe it or not, like, if you get to like your stuff faster than your opponent, especially if you're already are going first anyway, so you're already up anyway 1 credit slot, and then you add in another one, you can really do some dirty things when you're that far ahead. It's often though just like finishing off like annoying target or killing an artillery or something.
Yeah.
It's a little. I almost want to say it's a little overcosted, but whatever. It's removal, so take it.
All right. Hudson Mark III, 4 cost, 3/4 bomber, 2 operations. Units damaged by Hudson are pinned.
I think a 4.
Yeah, this is pretty strong.
I always take this guy, but you don't always see him because he's kind of high special rarity.
The pinning is nice.
It's very good, and the 3 damage. No, so you pay 4 for the other guy, and you get the immediate effect. But this guy, you're pinning all the time, and you're getting the extra damage, and he's a lot harder to kill. So I mean, obviously this guy's higher rarity than that Blackburn, but I would probably take this Hudson like every time over the other guy.
Right.
So, yeah.
Doesn't seem like a lot more to say on that guy.
Yep.
Let's move to the Hurricane Mark IIA 3/3 Fury for 2 operation cost.
I'd give him a 3. I actually think he's worse than the 3/2 because he's 1 more.
The Fury is just not really that. Fury is a lot better on units with low operation cost, and 3/3 is not that good for this price point.
A 6 cost removal, now you're getting kind of absurd because like some of the most expensive removal in the game does a lot more than this for 6. It's not reasonable.
This unit is, however, very good at aggroing the enemy base.
Sure.
In terms of, I'm going to fly over the front line and do 6 damage. That can be quite good, but that's not always the situation you find yourself in. So it's a good stalemate breaker or whatever, especially if you have the front line. But it's not thrilling.
Nah, it's whatever. Like a 3, I guess.
Lancashire Fusilier is incidentally same art as the Valentine. I'm not quite confident of that.
Okay, that's the guy you were talking about. Has the art? I gotta.
Yeah, this tread is the tread of the Valentine in the image. You can tell from the background where there's like this guy who's surrendering or whatever in both the pictures.
Oh yeah, there it is. Huh.
All right. In any case, 4 cost, 5/6 vanilla, 1 operations.
4.
Yeah.
Maybe a 5.
I would debatably even give this a 5.
It's hard.
One of the best cards in draft.
This might be one of the best cards in the game for draft.
I'm gonna give this guy a 5. This is so good in draft because it's just pure stats.
Can I just say that one of the reasons I've been so negative on ratings is because of this guy? Like, I can't give things like 4s and 3s when I know that we're getting up to this guy. Like, he's that good, and he's common, right?
Yeah, you can have a draft deck with 4 of these, and it's extremely good. I've done it.
And when your opponent plays this, I mean, there's only so many removal spells that can even kill him. So it's kind of it's really annoying because I find myself having to throw the kitchen sink at this guy. You know,
he's definitely a boss.
Yeah. So I do want to. And the fact he's infantry is shockingly relevant because a lot of things are like double damage to tank. You know, and.
Like, if you played the 5/6 German Panzer that costs 5, I think it's actually worse than this guy. Because there's a lot more stuff that works on it. It costs more. It has more operation costs. I don't know. I don't think that's a bad card, but I think this card is amazing. I would give this guy a 5.
This guy's even like a 4 in Constructed, and only because there's just more commonly good cards in Constructed. So like you could argue 5 in draft just because of the way rarity works.
The efficiency on this card is very high. Just slugging it out with this guy is great. You're almost always going to be one of the most efficient units for this price point.
Yeah.
In terms of just like a head-to-head, this guy is excellent. All right, let's move on. Matilda Mark II, 3/5 heavy armor 1. Units damaged by Matilda Mark II are pinned.
So this is like maybe strictly better than the other guy that we looked at that was special, the Cromwell. Like I would take this guy over the Cromwell. And
yeah, I would too. I would say this guy is still like a 3 or something though.
So I don't race for this guy, but like when you're not getting the other guy we just talked about, then you take this tank. And
Yeah.
it's like it's the kind of unit that like I was saying earlier, it's the kind of unit that you put in the front line and then like let them attack him and just kind of like slow your opponent down. He's horrible at like getting people out of the front line. He just doesn't do enough damage.
If you play that card that gives somebody guard and play it on this guy, it can be very sick because the enemies get pinned when they attack him, and it gives him a large amount of health plus armor.
Yeah, and I played against the guy doing that to me, and I just cast grounded on him. Like that's why I don't like the buffs, because like grounded, for example, is like a 2-for-1 when people get too crazy with buffing, and that's why you always have to be careful getting too in love with buff kind of cards. So
good point.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to the precision bombing 4 cost. If you have a bomber on the battlefield, destroy an enemy unit.
I think it's a 3 only because of situational factors.
Yep, three in draft at least. Better in constructed, but it's just like how reliably are you going to have a bomber?
So funny about that. We both we're kind of new to the game, but at one point I guess this card cost 3, and it was like one of the best cards in the game. And I have a British deck with like most of the good cards, and nobody plays this card anymore. It's not just because it's more expensive, but just I think the way the game works, it's more aggro. There is.
I had it played on me from the British air deck.
Some people play it, and there's a card that gives you one of these for free, so people play that.
We'll get to that later. That card's quite good.
Yeah, I don't, I don't want to get sucked down a rabbit hole of constructed, but like, I guess what I'm saying is I've learned from like playing this game that like this. I weighed when I was a newbie. I like weighed this card as like the greatest thing in the universe, and I've slowly started to realize like there's more to the game going on than like this card is doing. There's a lot of like combo and wackiness going on nowadays too, where you will be holding this card the entire game doing nothing because these weird decks are not like really playing the same game you're playing. So like there's more weight to cards that give plus attack. Because you need to kill these decks fast, and cards like this become like almost like a trap card. So you gotta just be careful on how much you weigh removal. And so funny enough, like in draft, removal's like king. It's one of the best things you could be doing. Unfortunately, you might not get the cards to support it. However, if you see this card late in the draft and you did get a bunch of bombers, I'd recommend it. This card kills literally everything. So it's
I mean that's except for immune to order stuff, but there's not that. But there's like 3 cards that are immune to orders.
Yeah. I can think of 2.
All of them are good, incidentally.
Three. The Alpine. Yeah. So all 3 of those cards are like the best cards in the game almost. But other than those 3 units, yes, this card will get you. It'll make you very happy.
Let's move on to the rescue mission. 4 cost. When there's a countermeasure. When a friendly unit is destroyed, add 2 copies of it to your hand.
It's too expensive.
I would say this is like a 3 maybe. It is card advantage, but it's expensive and situational. They might kill a cheaper unit first. In the right situation, this card is amazing, but there's also situations where it's dead, and it is a lot of resources to invest in something that doesn't produce an immediate effect and might actually not do anything depending on what the opponent does.
It's situational. Its rarity makes you want other cards, and you might just be better playing Convoy. Convoy draw 2 cards might just be better and cheaper.
I would say this is 3, but bad for its rarity.
Agreed.
All right, Royal Ulster Rifles. 4 cost 1 operations, 2/7 smokescreen. Damage dealt to your HQ is dealt to Royal Ulster Rifles instead.
I don't like it. For its rarity, a 3.
Yeah, I'd say it's a 3. Again, I think this card is supposed to be very good and constructed somehow. It is like an extra reserve of HP for your base, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, and combo decks like to just not be dead. Commonwealth decks would rather you kill this guy than them.
Yeah, but the odds of you setting that up here are limited.
It's the problem with it is if people like have like planes and stuff, they can just attack your base with no recourse, and this guy's dying.
Yeah.
So it's like there's no like damage back. So it's not like all positive, and it's just whatever.
He is pretty sick with naval support to get a 7/7 though.
True.
All right. The Empire strikes. Deal X damage to each enemy, where X is equal to the number of bombers you have.
It's too situational. I actually don't own any of these cards, which is I usually own these
I would
cards.
give this card like a 2 in draft. It's very situational. If you have a bunch of bombers, like sure, pick it up, but like if.
Is that not win more though? Like if you've got like 3 bombers, you're
If you
probably
have a bunch of bombers, you're probably winning. That's a good point.
yeah. In draft, it's actually a solid card in constructed sometimes, but
Yeah, not a lot to say though. I think.
Nah, and I don't even think I've ever had. I might have had the chance to draft it once, and I passed on it because it just didn't work for me. So
Bad for rarity, also.
Yeah.
Probably too. All right, Typhoon Mark 1B, 4-cost, 4/4 fighter, 2 operations. When a gradient retreats, draw a card.
I've never taken this card.
I've taken this guy, and I think he's pretty good.
I think the problem with him is that every time he comes up for me, I just didn't have retreat cards, and I couldn't count on getting them.
Or low 4, because 4-cost, 4/4 fighter is not bad. Like, that's playable. There's a Soviet Union that's 4-cost, 4/4 fighter, 2 operations vanilla, and I've used that before and had it be good. And this is like, in addition to that, you have some ability to draw cards.
I agree. What did you rate it?
I would say this is like low 4 or high 3. I would put the one that's a vanilla as a 3, and then this is like that, but with like that extra edge.
It could become a 4 for you in the right situations, sure.
One note, this is much better if your ally is Germany, because Germany has many retreat units.
It works for America too. They've got a bunch.
Do they? I thought they just had the one. Maybe
They have that truck. They have an infantry.
No, the infantry sends to hand and doesn't retreat. So it doesn't trigger.
That doesn't trigger it? Really?
Yeah, but it's I mean, that's just like, so it's like a little bit worse.
Really? The wording like somehow makes it hand, so you don't.
Yeah, it says return it to hand. I don't know why it doesn't retreat.
Weird. Okay, fine. I guess there's the one.
You have the front line, so it would be the same, but you know, it doesn't trigger. Anyway, also really good with the RAF Lightning, which is of course an amazing card, which we'll get to soon.
But that card is high rarity, so
Yeah,
unlikely to get both.
All right, 5-cost, 3.7-inch anti-air gun, 2/3 deployment pinhole enemy air, 1 operation.
I don't like it. I mean, the pinhole area is situational and it costs too much. Like at 5, you should be playing like bombs or like.
I put this as a 2. It's just like we were discussing earlier. Notionally, this is good, but as we were saying, this is an artillery unit that's over specialized for the target. There are some decks and situations where you want to have this, and there's others where you just don't.
This is what I'm saying though. Like, this thing costs 5 and it only does 2 damage. There's like a 3-cost mortar in Japan that does 4 damage. Like, this. I'm just noticing like they don't do a lot of damage with their artillery for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't think it's a very good card. Let's move on.
Yep.
Churchill Mark 4, 5-cost, 2/6 guard, heavy armor 1.
I'd say a strong 3. Like, the guard is great. It works with that card that gives you the naval thing. The armor.
It's a 3. Its weaknesses, it's bad attack.
Yeah.
I would much rather have the Japanese guard unit that's just a 4/7 infantry.
Mm-hmm.
Or
there's also the 5 drop. All the Japanese have the tank that costs 5, has guard and like ambush, and it's like a 4/5.
Yeah, the 4/5, but it only has it in your back line, but that's probably where you want it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those units are better than this.
It just fits the theme that they have low attack and high health, and that they
also excellent with naval support. Incidentally, become a 6/6 with heavy armor 1 and guard. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. It's not an exciting card.
All right, grounded, 5-cost, putting it on top of owner's deck.
Potentially a 5.
I would say this is a 4 and not a 5, but it's definitely very strong. This is removal. It also has the really nice effect of making this so that you know what your opponent's next draw is, which kind of eliminates some uncertainty in the situation.
Yeah, you could win the game because the opponent plays, let's just say the 5/6 guy, and you just keep putting it on the top of his deck, and he only has like 2 cards in hand. So it's like,
And meanwhile, your other units are hitting them.
yeah, you're counting like, okay, I have 2 grounded in my hand. If I cast this twice, I win the game. Like, I know I win the game because if he had a better unit, he would have played it by now, and I know what he's drawing next turn. So
yeah, so I would say 4, but I think it's also interesting. Like the Lancashire Fusiliers, this is quite a strong card, and it's a common.
yes, this is. You take a lot of these. There's so many things to say about this card, though, too. Like, so if you're putting like Tiger tanks on the top of their deck, just by replaying it, you're costing them 3 more resources.
There are also rare situations where you might play this on yourself in order to trigger an important deployment effect again. It's unlikely, but it is possible.
I've never even thought of that. But if you were to choose a Tiger tank, they paid 8, so you're up 3, and then they have to pay 8 again to play it the next turn. So that's like 11 points of tempo that, and you're probably doing stuff while this is happening. This is a great card to play in conjunction with other maneuvers. And
imagine if the opponent has 2 really good units and your board is blank, and you play that American Avenger to kill one of them, and then you do this to put it on top of your deck so they can't kill it, and you get to replay it and kill their other good unit.
Yeah, it's
super niche. Will not happen normally, but would be amazing if you set that up.
I would just say too.
This is just stalling the opponent, and it's really good at that also.
A lot of newer players like kind of miss that this is removal. It doesn't feel like removal when it goes to the top of their deck, but it kind of right. Like it is removal. Like they're losing a card when you play this, and and like you said too, it doesn't always have to be like their best card. It could be like a mediocre card. And now you know they're drawing a mediocre card next turn.
Sometimes you're in a dominant spot and you're like, oh, I'm going to play this on their 222 or whatever just to make it so I know that their next draw is something bad.
Right. Yeah, don't feel like you're wasting this card on a bad unit. You're actually giving them another bad unit.
All right, let's move on to the Hampton Mark I. 5-cost bomber, 3/3 with Blitz, 2 operation.
3.
3. In theory, you look at this and you're like, oh man, 3 strength bomber with Blitz? That's tight. The problem is it costs 5. You need to have 7 resources to do this. By the time you have 7 resources, 3 attack might not be that good, especially for your whole turn.
Yep.
Alright, not much more to be said about that one, honestly. It's not that it's bad, it can be good, but it can also sometimes not have what it takes. M4 Firefly, 5-cost, 2 operations, 8/5. Damage from M4 Firefly ignores heavy armor.
I'm gonna give it a 4, but like, it's like okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah, I'd give this a 4, but it's not a super high 4, and other elites are often better. Heavy armor is a relatively niche ability, and with 8 attack, you will already be killing most heavy armor units in 1 hit. The main benefit of this is that it kills tigers in 1 hit.
I think that's like literally the reason it exists is to say, oh, see, we made a unit that kills tigers. So
yeah, I mean, and that's like somewhat accurate to its historical role. This version of the Sherman had a really powerful gun, and actually was able to knock out tigers and panthers relatively easily compared to the normal Sherman armaments. But that's a relatively niche role. It's there are situations where your opponent just doesn't have armor, and this is like you have a big attack number, but your defense is not all that good for your cost. You might just end up trading with something. But it is probably overstated for its cost, in addition to having this ability. So overall, I would say it is stronger than average, but there will often be better elites than this.
Yep.
All right, moving on. Night Raid. 5-cost, copy random order from enemy deck. Note that the order that you copy goes into your hand. Add a number 10 commando to support line. Note that the number 10 commando's ability does go off to deal 1 damage to a random enemy when you play this card.
I don't think I don't even know if I've ever actually played this card. It's kind of rare, and I just don't seem to draw it. So it seems good in theory. You're getting it's card advantage because you're getting 2 things for 1. I want to say a 4 because of card advantage, and like you might draw something good. Hopefully your opponent's playing good cards, so you'll get good cards from it. I don't know. You have any thoughts there?
I think this is like, again, there's an element of randomness. Sometimes you get an order that like is actually just bad with your deck, or like the opponent drafted a bad card and you drew it by mistake. But often it'll be like some kind of removal. Plus you got the number 10 and you did a random damage. This card is card advantage because it basically gives you the number 10 commando plus another thing. I'm not thrilled by this. I would say it's probably a 3 or a 4, but it is like by no means bad.
Keep in mind, playing the commando costs you 2 hypothetically, so it's really it's like playing the commando and then something for 3, which gives you a copy. So it's
plus it does give you a 1 damage ping. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. Probably a 3 or 4, I think.
Yeah, not exciting.
Not the best again for its rarity. All right, here's a card that's great for its rarity. RAF Lightning F4. This card's probably a 5.
Yeah.
5 cost, 3/5 deployment. Enemy unit retreats. 2 operations.
I love it.
Yeah, I'd say this is a 5.
Yep. I don't know if we need to even say why. I mean, it has high health. It's for the cost. It's just good against things.
And you can compare it also to the other units that have a similar effect. So the US has one that's like a 3 cost 2/2 tank, but that one only works on air and infantry, so it doesn't work on artillery, and it doesn't work on tanks. Additionally, the American one has relatively bad stats. This one has like actually pretty decent stats, and the Hummel, which is the German artillery one, is a 2/4 for 5, and it only works if you have a tank. And then the German Panzer, whatever, I don't actually remember which mark it is or whatever.
Yeah.
But that one's a 6 cost 5/5 that retreats an enemy unit. I think this one compares pretty favorably to those.
I think it's
Debatably,
maybe
the German tank that costs 6 is better, but that card is probably also a 5.
right, exactly. And retreat, not only is it tempo, but it can protect you from someone who's just throwing a ton of buffs on something.
Yeah.
It can get usually guard units that are saving them from losing the game. You can just say see you later. Also,
send a mobilized unit back to hand, and they have to build up those stats again.
Also, around the cost of this unit is when people start dropping big costly things, and it's nice to just make them like if someone's dropping something that costs like 6, it's pretty likely that they're gonna like spend their entire turn to do it again, which means you
so it's
basically
like their turn.
yeah, it's like they did nothing for 2 turns, because even though they're gonna have that super nice unit again, they have to waste like their whole turn to do it. And if you have any advantage on the board, you're going to really push it. So it's a great card.
All right. Let's move on. Royal West Kents. 5 cost 2/5. When a friendly guard unit is attacked, it deals damage equal to its defense.
Oh my gosh. So I had 2 of these in my deck, and I kept attacking with my units and wondering why it wasn't working. It says attacked. So it only works when they attack you. Oh, that's yeah. So the story of my draft deck is I didn't get very many guard units in my deck, and this thing honestly was a complete dud. I still
I'd
ended.
say this is like a 2 or a 3. The ability seems sick in theory, but it's like not that practical. The stats are bad for the cost. If you already have a bunch of guard units in your deck, sure, draft this. But I'm not like going out of my way to grab this one.
Yeah, I did not like them at all. Obviously, I didn't even read the card correctly. But anytime you let your opponent choose, they're going to usually take the best choice for them and not for you. So you're letting your opponent decide, do I want to attack that guard unit this turn? Maybe I don't. So whatever.
Maybe you just hope they forget about it. But that's not really a good way to do it.
No.
All right, let's move on. Oops, I skipped a page. All right, let me make sure.
Yeah, or a sexton.
Okay, Sexton. 5 cost, 3/4. Artillery. Deployment. Pin an enemy unit. At the start of your turn, pin that unit again. This is actually very good. This is probably a 5.
So I didn't know this, but this thing basically pins for infinity.
Yeah, this keeps firing. The at the start of your turn ability just keeps going, as far as I know.
Yes, and
Until you die.
so I actually got this card in a pack, and I was like super excited to use it. And every time I play it, someone just kills it. And then I thought how it worked is it pins, and then like even if it dies, it's gonna pin again. Not true. However, then someone played it against me, and my unit was pinned infinitely. And yeah, I couldn't kill it. I was sad, and I was pretty frustrated by the fact my awesome unit could literally do nothing for the entire game. So I ended up losing to this unit, and yes, it's very good. This thing's got to be like a 5, right?
I'd say it's a 5.
Yeah.
Like you get a pretty good artillery unit, and you also essentially take an enemy unit out of the game as long as you're in.
I will only add that like I'm giving it a 5 because the ability is awesome, and still I insist that these artillery stats are not spectacular. 3,
It's
4.
awesome stats for cost, no doubt.
No, it's probably pinning a powerful unit and then maybe killing weaker units, but it's not killing weaker units or strong units itself. Like, it's just the thing with the British, I guess.
All right, let's move on to the shelling. 5 cost, deal 1 damage to all enemy units and pin them. Enemy loses a credit slot.
4, but maybe a
I'd
5.
say it's a 4.
Yeah.
Pinning the field is good. Enemy loses a credit slot is good. 1 damage is good. Maybe this is a 5, actually. This is pretty sweet.
This is one of those cards that I actually got really early in the game, and I put in one of my constructed decks, and then I thought it was bad, and I took it out. But
Maybe
I've
4, actually. Because I don't think this is good compared to, like, Monty, for instance.
the thing is, I actually have started putting it back in decks, and yeah, I mean, we're talking about draft, and it like pinning things is very strong. It's expensive. I feel like this card should say draw card, but that's probably busted.
Yeah.
And
Maybe draw a card instead of lose a credit slot or something.
make
That would
it.
still be a very strong card.
It's one of those cards that sometimes it's going to be insane for you, and sometimes it's like just a good, I guess.
Yeah.
The losing a slot, like we said earlier, it's not nothing. Getting to your expensive stuff sooner than your opponent is actually very powerful, but it's not a great top deck in the very late game either.
I'd give this one a 4, probably.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Spitfire Mark 1A 5/5, 5 cost, 2 operations. Fighter.
I'm tempted to say 4, but it could
I'd
be.
give this a 4. This is just a solid block of stats. It's better than other fighters that are just stats.
It will kill tanks sometimes and live. Like a 4/5 tank, it just dies to this.
I've won a fair few games with like these just flying over the front line, strafing the enemy HQ.
Yeah, 5 means you hit them 4 times, you win the game.
Yeah.
You know? So it could just be like a finisher. It's so beefy that it will survive most forms of removal. Most backline or support removal does 4 damage and has 5 health. So yeah, like I won a lot of my games in my recent draft with this card.
Pretty strong. Also a common.
Often we'll get a 2-for-1 because of its health. Like you'll often kill something and then kill or trade with something else.
All right. A34 Comet, 6 cost, 2 operations, 6/6 heavy armor 1. When this unit deals damage to enemy HQ, draw a card.
I don't own this card and I could buy it and I don't even want it.
I'd say this is like a strong 4 in draft.
Yeah.
It's not really a 5. It's not reliable that you're going to be able to be damaging the enemy HQ to draw a card with this, but it has like some solid stats for just slugging it out. It can take down most units in 1 hit. It can take a hit from most things or even multiple hits. Yeah.
This is a great example of it's good because it's elite, but otherwise, meh. Like, I'd probably take bombers over it if it was an elite choice, but sure.
There are better elites, but it's certainly not a weak card to have in your deck.
Yep, it'll pick on a lot of things pretty well.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one. That's going to be the BL 4.5-inch medium gun. 3/3 artillery, deployment, pin an enemy unit, 6 cost, 2 operation.
I think it's a 3, and I certainly wouldn't pick a lot of them. Like, it's common, but I wouldn't take too many.
I would give this a 4, but I would say that I don't want more than 2 of it.
Yeah.
It's very, it can pin anything except for units that can't be pinned, which is like that 1 tiger, and I think that's it.
I think there's a Russian tank as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The 6/4.
Well, in any case.
Yep.
Comes in, pins a heavy hitter, and then you have like a solid artillery piece for the future as well. I think it's pretty good, but like you said, too many of these. We are at the point in the cost curve now where if you have like 5 of these, that's too many.
Yep.
All right, not much to be said. Let's move on to the Grenadier Guards. 6 cost, 5/9 guard.
This is one of the best units in the game.
5.
Yeah. In constructed, the fact it costs 6 is actually a boost because it can't be killed by annihilation. And you're at that health point where like, I mean, there's almost nothing in the game that can kill this thing in one hit. Is there even what? Like legitimately?
Let me think about it. Well, I mean, there's like cards that just like destroy X.
Is there? No, most tanks only do 8.
No, I mean, like, you know, they can play friggin' Empire of the Sun on this. They can play.
Right. No, I mean other units can't one shot.
Fortress, but it's garbage.
Yeah. So the point is that like this thing's almost unkillable without removal, and there's very limited removal that can even target
It
it.
does get randomly blown up by U.S. bombers, though.
Okay, sure. The one that does 5 health or more. Sure.
Yeah, it kills anything with 5 health or more, or the Flying Fortress.
But the point is, we're mentioning cards that are like some of the best cards in the game, and this card is still like fine. So, you know,
It's strong.
Critical Strike could kill it, sure, but yeah.
Yeah, but this is like and in draft, this is even stronger. I wouldn't say this is probably a 5 in constructed, but in draft, this is just one of the sickest cards you can get.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say constructed 5, but it might be a 4.
Yeah, it would probably be a 4 in constructed.
Yep.
But in draft, the stat efficiency is going to beat down most things your opponent plays, and it has guard. This can keep your base alive, and keep your artillery alive, and keep your bombers alive. And even like moving to the front line, it's not bad. 5 attack is not bad. Only 1 operation cost. This is a very strong card.
I've had games where I've had to throw 3 units at this thing just to kill it so I can win.
Yeah.
You know?
What I would say, this is a high priority. This is one of the best cards.
Yeah, take that card every time.
All right, let's move on. 6 cost Mosquito FB Mark 6. 2 operations, 4/4 fighter, deployment, deal 3 damage to an enemy unit.
This is a 5. I don't even have to talk about this one.
I think this is a 5. I want to just point out one thing, though. I was freaking trickstered by this card's art that shows it bombing something. It's
Yeah.
not a
Dude, I think this card's a bomber so much that when I'm building constructed decks, I'm in the bomber section looking for it.
Its ability is also bomber-like in the way that bombers are expressed in this game. So this is another example of a card that I think can be confusing. Even though it's confusing, it's still a 5.
This is a card where my opponent has it out, and I'm trying to think of how to kill the bomber. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that's not a bomber.
Dude, I attacked someone with this, and then I like alt-tabbed, and I came back and I had taken damage. And I was like, why did I take damage? I guess I missed something. And then I attacked another unit, thinking I was just going to bomb it and blow it up. And my guy traded with him. And I was like, oh, this guy's a fighter. Oh. That was a derpy moment in an earlier draft.
Yeah, and I'm sure people love hearing our newbie mistakes, but hey, we're all new at some point, you know? So.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Number 43 commandos. 6 cost, 2 operations, 3/3 ambush and fury. When you give an order, deal 2 damage to a random enemy.
Okay, I want to be a jerk and say 3.
I'm gonna say 4 in draft. He's much worse in constructed.
Yeah, sure.
This ability is like really cool. It can be very strong. The problem with this is that the commander decks, this guy doesn't have smokescreen.
Yep.
And as a result of that, he will die comparatively easily compared to the other commandos, especially in the commando deck that runs almost no units. But Fury means that if this guy gets in the front line, he can do a lot of damage. Ambush will keep some things back, and he has a good ability. The main risk with this unit is that 3/3 with Ambush is good, but by the time that you're playing this unit, the opponent might be playing late game tanks that don't care that much about it.
Hilariously, the picture is dudes being spotted in the night, and they're freaking out. So, like, maybe they're just really bad at hiding.
Yeah. The picture actually makes it seem like they're not doing a good job.
I don't like this card. Just is like not as good as other things. I could see myself choosing specials over this card. It's not like we've gone over this with German, but once you hit 6, I'm starting to find like bombs, and I want to win the game because of the card. This guy feels like some kind of weird support card to me, and not like a I win the game kind of card. So
yeah, I could see it. I could see giving this guy a lower rating. I certainly think he's not the best thing that you can get for your elite slot. There's often going to be better options, but yeah.
Yeah. Spitfire.
Yeah, let's move on to the Spitfire Mark 5. 6 cost, 6/6, 2 operation. Pretty similar to the previous Spitfire.
Yeah, like I'd say like a 3. Like like if I have the room, like you have to be careful. You can't get too in love with these expensive cards. You
I
know?
give this guy a 4. I think he's basically the same as the previous one. It's efficient stats.
Okay.
It,
Yeah, but you don't want four. You really don't want four of them, I don't think.
No,
And
you don't.
like he's almost limited by his cost and like how much you can fit at that level. And like the first or one or two of these things are probably like a 4, and then anything after that they become 3s just because you're like
This
bloat.
card is also a giant problem for an opponent that has a bunch of bombers. It's so annoying to have bombers and have these big stat spitfires.
Yeah. It's like a hard counter almost to that. If it's like it's a very heavy bomber, like let's say they're doing like bomber guard, like this thing is just like nope.
Yeah, it's like, all right, good luck, dude.
And he can probably kill their guard unit.
All right, we'll move on to the Sterling Mark 1 S3. 6 cost, 2 operations, 6/4 deployment. Add a Gladiator Escort Fighter to the support line. The Gladiator Escort Fighter is, for reasons that I don't fully understand, worse than the normal Gladiator. It's only a 1/1 instead of a 1/3.
Probably just balance, right?
Yeah, probably.
See, I would take this guy over the commando, and this is what I'm saying, you know.
Yeah, I would too.
So this is a solid 4, I guess.
I think this is a strong 4, and the commando is a weak 4.
Yeah.
Not a lot else to say about this. One good note is that this guy is extra strong if it's bomber against bomber.
Yeah.
Because the enemy bomber will have to attack your fighter.
I've had those situations where it's like the front line's either empty or clogged or something, and they're just hitting me with bombers, and this escort saves my life. So yeah.
Yep. All right, we'll move on to the 9.2-inch coastal gun. 7 cost, 2 operation, 4/4 artillery. Every time this attacks, your HQ gets +3 defense.
3 at best. I actually like never pick this guy because at 7 I'm getting more picky about what I'm taking.
I'd say this is a 3. You know, it is good, but it costs a lot to deploy, like you said. The HQ defense is also the best situation for this. Is like maybe you're losing the early game and you stabilize, and this is what you need to put you out of range of like blitz fighters or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
Situational though, and expensive, and meh.
also, if you get to fire many times with this, your HQ can gain a huge amount of defense, which is pretty cool. But like often I find that HQ defense isn't that important because it kind of goes to who achieves like massive card advantage and board dominance. This game doesn't really have like hard resets, or it has very few of them, and as a result, like sometimes if you have a 20 HQ base or a 20 HP base or a 30 HP base, and your opponent has like 3 tanks and 3 cards in hand, and you have nothing, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, I've won tons of games with 1 health, and
Or it doesn't matter much, but yeah.
Yeah, like I just put a tiger like in the front line, and even if they have like 3 or 4 cards, if they don't have any kind of like plane, then I just win. Like they can be at 30 health. It doesn't matter. It'll just take another turn to kill them. The game just feels like not snowball, but like once you've kind of like got them in like a headlock, they don't get out of the headlock. So.
All right. Lancaster B3. 7 cost, 3 operation cost, 5/4 blitz. When this unit damages an HQ, cards in enemy hand cost +1 credit.
Dude, I want to say a 5. I actually think this is like a strong 5 in constructed too. I flat out beat decks before with this card, like especially the control-y decks, where like I hit them twice with this and they concede, even at like 30 health.
I would give this a 4 in draft, where the ability is less likely to be really good. But in constructed, this can be another card that just shuts down a combo deck.
Yeah.
So they have to have not already got you with their combo by turn 10.
So the damage is insanely relevant. Like 5 damage is what you're looking for, and even though you're kind of wasting your turn, this is usually like the turn that like your hands are starting to get thin, and like if they lose a really important unit, you might just take control of the game.
Yeah, like if they had a plan that was like 2 or 3 cards, and this like bumps them to the point where they can't execute their plan, that can be very strong.
I love this card. I mean, sure, a 4, but it could be a 5.
4 in draft.
It's an extremely expensive removal spell, but It also lives, hopefully, at the end of that removal
Plus,
spell.
there's that extra ability, which can be nice.
Yeah.
I think the other Lancaster is better than it, but we'll get to that later.
It's a,
Lend-Lease. Draw 4 cards. 7 cost.
I might be, like, I don't know, like controversial, but I don't like this card as much as Convoy.
I think this is a 4. I think this might be better in constructed. But in draft, this can often clog your hand. This is really expensive. It's basically going to take your turn until the very late game.
Yeah, like I'd rather my deck be full of Convoys than like this card. Because like Convoy's still getting me a card extra, and I might be drawing towards something I really need on like turn 5, where this card is doing nothing. And
this card is one of the absolute best things you can get when it is the like late game, top deck wars or whatever though.
so right, and then maybe you play like 1 or 2, but like 3 is probably crazy unless you're super confident.
It costs too much.
Yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
All right, Manchester 1A, 7 cost, 6/4 a bomber, 3 operations, deployment, add a precision bombing to your hand.
I mean, it's card advantage and stuff. It's
I
great.
would basically give this a 5. If you play this on turn 11 or 12, you can immediately use precision bombing. So it becomes play this, kill anything you want, and you have a bomber afterwards.
I have held this card for longer than necessary because I literally didn't have another bomber in my deck. Or maybe I drew them all.
2 punch in case they removed you.
Exactly. Or like maybe I did have like, let's say 3 other bombers, but they all died already. Then,
Right.
I had to hold it. I wasn't going to risk losing this bomber. So this guy's actually not easily killed. I mean, 4 health is still a lot. But for the cost, it can be killed. So don't get cocky, play this, and then get it killed, and then have nothing, to use precision bombing on. Precision bombing is still situational in draft. Less situational because you get a bomber with it. But, don't mess that up.
Yeah. I like what you said earlier. Don't get cocky with this one.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to the Tempest Mark V. 7 cost, 3/7 fighter with ambush, +4 attack on enemy turns, 2 operations.
Okay, this is the kind of card I take aggressively. Not like, it's like better, if like I got to worry about early game. Like philosophically, you want to, with British, you want to cover your bases in the early game and then take the good cards later, or the expensive cards. But I actually use this guy almost like a closer.
I would say this is probably a 4 for draft.
Yes.
This card is incredibly strong against fighters.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, against bombers.
Mm-hmm.
This card is incredibly strong. If you can actually clear the front line and move this in, having a 7/7 ambush on the front line is often insurmountable.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm sure I didn't invent this, but like as a newbie, I quickly realized that if you put this thing in the front line, you win the game often. There's very few units in the game that actually counter that, and a big part of it is the fact that you have ambush.
Maybe you put this on the front instead of in the back, and I was like, oh, dang.
Yes, and it's like a super guard because often you'll have 1 or 2 bombers in your support line, and what you do is you use those bombers who probably don't do a lot of damage but good damage. You use them to kill off their like weaker units, so like the 2/2s and 3/4s and stuff, and then he will kill like the more powerful units himself with ambush. So what ends up happening is they get into this weird situation where they don't want to kill off their weak or super good unit, so they'll start playing like crappy units trying to like just get through your ambush, but then you're using your removal and bombers to kill the crappy unit. So what ends up happening is they just get stuck in their base and then you kill them because eventually they run out of cards.
It can be a really crushing card, especially for decks that don't have much that gets around and has to go to the front line. You're just like, well, here's my 7/7 with ambush. Good luck.
So, and here's another thing. He actually protects himself because if they play like a 3/3 or something, you can use him to kill the 3/3, and then when it's their turn, he has ambush. So it doesn't, even if he has 1 health, he's still going to kill like the 5/5 tank or even the 5/5 tank with armor.
Yeah.
So
this guy can be a big obstacle.
yeah, so he will not even need a combo. Like, he himself can win. And I actually played an opponent as one of my very final games today, where I could tell my opponent knew this because he was like trying to make these guys retreat a lot, and he was doing like everything he could to like keep me from putting him in the front line, because I think he knew what was going to happen when I got him there, and then I eventually did get him there and I won the game. So
Now, I will say he is bad for his cost on offense, but his defensive and like causing problems for the opponent capabilities are so good that it doesn't matter that much.
yeah, you just sort of take over. It's like I was literally just saying this with the Tiger Tank. He's similar to the Tiger Tank because he can kind of just like make a wall, and then you just use planes to kill their base, and you can actually just start burning them out. And they have to do something. Like, what if they don't get this guy out of the way or have like other planes that are just as good? Then they're screwed. They can't win.
All right.
Yeah, very good card.
Carpet bombing, 8 cost, 3 damage to all enemy units.
5. I can't. No, it's just 5.
Incredible card, extremely good in both draft and constructed.
It's
This is one of very few like board wipes or like close to board wipes that exists in this game.
this is the kind of effect that like warps a game like around it. Like 3 damage makes units better if they have 4 health. It's card advantage. It's like a reset. It allows card draw to be good. Like, you can't say enough about this card.
The really crazy thing about this also is that this is like a defining card even in constructed. Like, if I've been playing a lot of aggro this season. I've been playing Japanese Soviet aggro, which is a very strong deck. Darkness, who is another player who's been having very good results this season, was also playing it, and I kind of looked at the sort of stuff he was doing and sort of made my own version of that. I was impressed by watching him stream that deck. And this, when you're playing against a British deck and you're playing that aggro, it's like, okay, I have to win by turn 8 or he's going to carpet bomb me and wipe my board. So I have to be either winning or extremely close to winning. You know, that's just the way it is.
Yep, I've also played his deck, and I got it from just looking at his stream. And I knew to because I played against him and he used the deck against me, and then I went and looked to see if he was playing it on his stream. And basically the combo 2 is you play War Bonds on turn 5, and then you get to play this on turn 6. So
that's pretty sweet.
So like, as long as you don't die on turn 5, you will kill them all on turn 6.
I haven't run into that yet. Actually, I was talking about playing his Japanese Soviet aggro deck rather than, I haven't actually seen him play this one. But that sounds like a pretty nasty combo.
Well, he was playing Carpet Bomb, right? So you were playing Japanese Soviet, or he was?
Yeah, I was saying that when you're playing the Japanese Soviets, Carpet Bomb is one of the things you most need to watch out for.
Right, but he's playing American British. That's one of his decks he's been going up the ladder with.
Yeah. I haven't actually seen him playing that one. I had watched an earlier stream where he was just doing the normal aggro thing.
Oh, okay. Okay, so he was worried about Carpet Bomb. Okay,
Yeah.
but he's actually been laddering with U.S. British, and I've played the same deck. It's really strong. So think about that. An aggro deck has to kill you by like turn 6, or they just wipe you, and then you're probably having a lot of trouble winning after that.
All right. Let's move on to the Lancaster Mark 1, 9 cost, 7/4 blitz, 3 operations.
Low. Like, the problem is it's cost. Like, if you have space for a finisher, take it. It's like a 3. Like,
I'd give this a 4. I think this is a very strong finisher.
yeah, it does blitz, and you can do it at 12. That's true. Okay, I'll take it back. Draft, I'll give it a 4.
All right, we'll move on. Last card, the Commonwealth.
Nah.
12 cost, 20 damage to the enemy HQ if your HQ has 30 or more defense. Draw 4 cards.
Meh. I don't know.
This is like a 0, or like a.
I mean, you draw 4 cards. You know what it's like? It's like a bad version of Lend-Lease.
But it's so much worse.
It's 5 more costs to draw 4 cards.
Let's go back to Lend-Lease. Lend-Lease is draw 4 cards for 7. This is, you pay 5 more for the same effect. That's so bad.
Yeah, and you're also
discussing the main effect of this card because it's not going to happen in draft. It's so unrealistic.
And you're also giving up potentially an elite or special.
Yeah. So this is also, the decks that play this normally, in my opinion, are also bad. I had this actually deal 20 damage to me, or like, you know, maybe it's happened and I forgot, or maybe
you do play aggro, but
Dude, it feels so good to be playing against one of the like some commando deck that's trying to do this, and then they just like resign themselves to playing it for cards. And like, yeah, I've got this guy. You know?
Yeah, I think I did lose to it one time because the guy played that thing that makes their base only take 1 damage, and
Oh yeah.
and so like he was at like 34, and even though I was hitting him for like 7, it was getting changed to 1 damage, and I was like, well, I guess you just got me. But yeah, it's one of those cards you have to play around in constructed, but like when you know it's gonna come, you just get them down to like 25, and you're like, well, I guess you can't win. So, you know, I agree with you.
Don't take this in draft. You can build constructed decks around this as like your main card, but like I wouldn't recommend it, quite frankly.
Agreed.
That's actually going to do it. That's the entire British faction. So thanks for tuning in, guys. We managed to get through that one a little faster than the previous one. We are going to keep doing these, so stay tuned for more reviews. And I believe sneak preview next up is the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was fun.
All right. So stay tuned for that. I'm not actually sure when we're going to do it. Next week, I'm going to be at a Star Wars Legion tournament in real life, and will not be. So we aren't going to do it at this same Friday time slot, but we might jump into it the week after that, or maybe just find a new time slot or something. We do plan to continue with these reviews.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Sploosh, for coming on and doing this review series. This has been fun. Thanks to the viewers, and we'll be coming back later with more cards and potentially Star Wars Legion content. So thanks for watching, y'all, and we will see you later.
Bye, guys.